what I said. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome. Great to see you all, to all my board colleagues, Dr. Stubblefield, to our staff. Thank you for joining us on this Friday morning. To anyone that is joining us virtually, welcome and good morning. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is Friday, May 24th, 2024, 9:03 a.m. We'll call our meeting to order this morning. As we do at every board meeting, we'll read our board norms and protocols. We agree to respect differences of opinions in making decisions for the district, to follow best practices in managing the superintendent and management of the board itself, stay on task when conducting business for the district, including while at board meetings, to never surprise the superintendent or each other when conducting official business of the district, to read these norms at the beginning of each board meeting and at board workshops as a reminder of how to conduct our meetings, and to continually self-check to determine if we're following our norms when conducting district business. Again, welcome. Thank you all for joining this morning. Just a couple of quick reminders. We are using Google Meets this morning, so just a reminder for folks, and I believe almost everyone is using Google Meets here. Just make sure your mic is turned off or volume down if you're not speaking, and cameras as well. If you're not speaking, if you want to turn your camera off, that'd be great as well. And make sure you speak into the microphone when speaking so everyone can hear you. And if you do have a question online, and if I don't see you or call on you, if you raise your hand, just blur it out and we'll make sure that we get you called. So with that, again, thank you everybody for joining us. And with that, Ms. Smith, would you please do a roll call?
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, present.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, present.
Randy Lopez,
Randy Lopez, present.
Robert Mylan Jr.,
Robert Mylan Jr. present.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, present.
Rachel Russell, Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, present.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can I have a motion to approve today's special agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Quick note for board, there was, during Finance Committee, we had tabled an item that wasn't, the documents were not in today's budget documents, but we had tabled an item for today's conversation around purchasing process for purchases under $20,000. I've asked Ms. Smith to roll that document into today's budget items as well, since it is budget related. It's not a different item. Today's meeting was noticed up as a budget discussion, so it falls and fits under this conversation. So we've included it here. I know we've got other budget-related items to get to, so we will have it here within the agenda as a budget item. Hopefully we can get to it, but if not, we may have to table it for a future meeting, but we'll try to roll through our budget conversations today. Dr. Nguyen, was there anything else? And thank you for reminding me about that.
Right, just the two that included the SMART goals.
Correct. Ms. Smith, if you could.
There's about three, the generic timeline, generic template, then the under 20,000, and then those additional questions that Mr. Carell outlined. I think there were like 7 questions. I have paper copy if you need reference.
Okay, thank you.
If you wouldn't mind rolling those over, Ms. Smith, thank you. Board, those will be in the budget documents for today's discussion as well, if and when we do get to those. Thank you. Any other discussion or questions on motion to approve the agenda? Seeing and hearing none, Ms. Smith, roll call.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy, yes.
Robert Mylan Jr.,
Robert Mylan Jr., yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell, Dr. Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So board, again, thank you for making time today on a Friday. During the day, I know everyone's busy, especially this time of year. Thank you to staff for pulling time together and pulling all the information together, Ms. Smith and all of our staff, Tracy, Brad, Wayne, everyone, Mr. Lilly, who's worked on getting the information together for our conversation today. I know it's a busy time of year, so thank you for taking your time out of your day this morning and during the week to get everything prepped. So we appreciate all the work y'all putting in. And board members, thank you for giving up part of your Friday as well as we continue our conversations around our budget and making some really important decisions as we're moving forward. So I just wanted to say that, and then I will hand this off to Dr. Stubblefield, and then we'll get started. I know there's some information that is being presented or shared around items that we had been discussed, and including department budgets that were being reduced, and so you have all that in front of you. So with that, Dr. Stubblefield.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We really are just going to make a lot of space for you to ask questions or get clarification. We will, I think Ms. Kaiser is going to share high level at this time from the last time that you saw the documents to this time, what are the new components, and then right now what you see would be a balanced budget minus whatever happens with negotiations, and then what you are doing, if you decide to do anything with your budget. She'll highlight the things that came up previously, and what it is a complete list of what we would be recommending to move forward. The only action that, once you get to a point today, that I would request that you take is make a decision on the administrative and classified salaries, so that HR and finance will not have to do like retro pay. The soonest those positions go into effect July 1, you've already made a decision on certified salaries. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Kaiser.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
So this is the same document we've been looking at for some time. So the first few slides, there are no changes, just the board priorities, what we've already completed, the ESSER continuations, and then some information. So on slide 7 are the beginning of the changes. We did get additional information from KSDE based on our projected enrollment and weightings, that the additional funding will be approximately $7.9 million. With the change in additional SPED funding, we're anticipating around $2.4 million. We have not received a final number from KSDE on that yet. So that gives us a total new funding of approximately $10.3 million. And then with that as a starting point, taking off the things that you've already committed to, the negotiated staff increases, health insurance, and work comp, leaves us a balance of $4.86 million. With the ESSER continuations, we're down to just under $1.3 million. And then with the additional 2 FACES positions, one at Washington and one at Schlegel, the instructional aides for early childhood that were previously paid out of ESSER, and then we did increase athletics $128,000, fine arts $56,000, and they were able to support the other requested items out of their own budget.
So on this slide, what I will say regarding FACES, we did present like having them at all the schools, and it was about $1.3 million. When we talked internally just for the planning and strategizing around that, at the secondary level, the only 2 schools that did not have them were Washington and Schlegel. And at the elementary level, several of them currently pay for it out of their title budgets. And until we can figure out what that would look, next year would give us an opportunity to plan for the remaining elementary. If any elementary building had the funds, they could add it this year, but we were going to focus on the secondary this year, making sure that all of those schools had them, and then work on a plan phasing them in at the elementary level in the most fiscally responsible way. And the instructional aids for the early childhood ensures that for the most part that there are 3 adults in the rooms, and that was a request that we've been like that since prior to ESSER, and then we use ESSER dollars. And so this is as they're making adjustments based off staffing needs that will cover that. So those were the 2 I don't think that we that either changed slightly or that we didn't give updated information on. The other ones were spoken about here.
And nursing is still a placeholder on there through negotiation, so I didn't put any amount in there.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes, I'm sorry, Dr.
Could you
Nguyen.
further explain the athletics other request? What other requests are those?
So, is Mr. Simmons on? So there were, when everybody looked at their budget and how things were allocated, there were things that, like, we have more students participating, so we have to increase, like, insurance and uniforms and those kind of things, but there were different ways. And then we also did the sports networking component, so that's built into the budget. But there were things that monies were allocated for that is no longer needed, so they were able to absorb it or shift it, because when you look in their budget, you may see in the document a reduction, but this is the addition, so it's just, so they have all that they need.
So when we look at, specifically at the athletic budget, those, that 128,000 will be identified.
It's broken down, yes,
You'll be able to identify.
Yeah.
And the same thing with fine arts.
yes.
What, fine arts budget is in fine arts, or?
It's fine arts, it
Okay.
has its own budget.
Thank you, thank you.
And while we're paused, I'll also just say, board members, hopefully you had a chance, there were some questions that were submitted ahead of time before today's meeting, and then responses were sent to the board, and I think they're in board docs, but they were also emailed to everyone. So there were some questions from board members, and hopefully you had a chance to review those prior to today. If not, they're in your email, so you can take a look at them. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Ms. Page.
In regard to faces, I know you said you're gonna work on the secondary. For the elementary schools that already had them, they will be coming back. I just wanna make sure I understand that.
Yeah, they will keep them. They currently pay for them out of title funds. If there are other schools that have enough title funds, they may add them, like, through that process. But we're saying, in order to level all of the secondary components, we're saying pay for these two out of the general funds. Nobody is, so we'll be adding, no one would be leaving.
Okay, so how many elementary schools, do we know how many they do have, and do we know how many we need to add? Does anybody have those numbers? And I didn't send the question in, I'm just.
No, yes, we do have them.
We have those numbers, I can get them for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for those online, if you couldn't hear Ms. Walker, we are working, we can get everyone the numbers on schools, elementary schools who do have faces and who don't have faces currently.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Kaiser.
No, please do stop me if you have any questions as we go through this. I appreciate that. So that left us a balance of around $829,000, and then putting in the classified and administrator salary increases. Then we did reduce all the department budgets by 3%. Some departments were able to make further reductions of about 2.4% total across the departments for a little under $1.3 million. And then we have $561,000 in vacancies that we're not planning on filling at this point in time. With the changes in printing, we are going to be able to reduce the printing costs about $150,000, and then we reduced the department travel by $64,000 and department food by $21,000, and that left us a balanced budget. Then the timeline, this first slide has already been is passed. And then the second one today, May 24th, a special board meeting. And then on June 26th, we will be going to the KSDE budget workshop. We anticipate KSDE releasing the state budget document early July. And then we will bring information to you at the July 16th board meeting on the revenue neutral rate. So it'll be a very short turnaround, but that is what timeline is at this point. And we have to report that to the county clerk on July 19th. I will open any questions on this.
Thank you, Ms. Kaiser. Any additional questions or thoughts from board members? Right, anything on the timeline or, okay, if not, would open up for any general questions on the budget documents that have been presented in board docs for the board. Any questions on any of those documents?
Mr. Lopez?
Yes, Dr.
Question
Nguyen.
for Dr. Stubblefield. Has the Department of Education given you any indication on how they're going to distribute excess costs for special ed.
The information we've seen is going to be about the 2.4 million that KCK would receive. We have not received the definite information on that, the final numbers, but that was the preliminary that we received.
I'm sorry, that's the additional funding, correct? No, I'm talking about the excess cost. They have to develop a new distribution plan. Have they given you any indication on where they are on that, or?
They have shared some information, high level, but we have not gotten final information. And that, once we have it, we'll know how to move forward. They are working through that. They have talked about what it might look like, but they haven't said this is what we're going to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions on the budget? The one ask, there is necessarily no ask on the budget today, except for, as you heard from Dr. Stubblefield this morning, staff is requesting for the board to take action on the administrator and classified salary increases today so that they can be implemented in a timely fashion beginning July 1. So that is the only action that is being requested today of the board. Around our budget, the rest of our time today is really just spent on going through and discussing or talking about any of the budget-related questions we might have. So are there any questions? I would ask first, are there any questions or discussion around the proposed salary increases by staff? And I know it's something we've discussed as a board a few times already, but any questions or discussion around that?
I have one,
Yes, Ms. Page.
and I think it would help. There are people who've asked about their pay, and are people clear about their steps? Do they have I don't know about classified as much, but for classified, is there a step where they can move up?
So a couple of things. One of the things when HR shared their report in November, they said that and it'll be available at the first June meeting, there will be a new classified salary scale that's presented. Historically, it was not. It was more, and I'm looking over at HR, there wasn't like, you go here, you go there, but that is what will be developed and presented. Historically, if somebody felt like they were misplaced, they would reach out to HR, then they would review their information, and if they were misplaced, they would place them, and if it was just a misunderstanding, they would explain like historically how they were placed. Same for the certified side, there is the scale, and if somebody feels like they're misplaced, they reach out to HR and they review it. But moving forward, if the board approves it, we will have a new classified salary scale so that people can see what that looks like in the progression for the various positions.
Because some people are still saying they're in place. The new people coming in are sometimes making more than they were making, and they're in. So have we cleaned that up?
So that could be true. If I come in as a teacher and I have
Well, not teachers.
And same with classify. If I come in a position and I have more experience than somebody who's been here and/or more education, I may be placed higher, because that's like, we pay off of experience and education. So depending on the position and what it is, that would be the case, because you would not want to not pay somebody for their experience and education.
Well, they got that. Now, I don't know. Some are saying they have equal experience, and they're just wondering how are they?
So they should
making more than
contact
them.
HR for it to be reviewed. Sometimes people make assumptions about their experience and their education, and if that is accurate, they move them to the appropriate place. So if there's somebody who has that question, they should reach out to HR, and they'll review it and look at it.
And is the new scale available for us to see?
It will be, they're finalizing it. It'll come to you for the first read on the June 11th, the first June meeting.
Because asking us to vote today, I kind of like to see it before we vote. That's just me.
Yeah, the percentage that you're allocating supports the scale. Like, if you don't want the scale, it wouldn't change the percentage that you're allocating. The percentage that you're allocating is equal to similar to what you did last year for classified and certified. So if you have an issue with the scale, unless you're changing the percentage, it would not impact what the scale is or what you're allocating to that. So unless you're increasing it, then would change the overall budget or decreasing it, either way, that has different implications, so that wouldn't change the scale.
Okay, so my similar question is, in the library, do we have the classified schedule for 24, 25?
I don't know if it's been placed in the library. It is on the district website currently. Not 24, 25, 23, 24 is. 24,
Right, I'm sorry,
yeah.
23, 24.
23, 24 is on the website. I don't know if it's in the library. I haven't looked for it in the library.
So one would have thought then you would present, the assumption, we have that as a document, and then you're saying each level gets you're proposing a 5% increase?
We're proposing a 5% allocation to the pool so that you can have a scale, then the scale you can make right, like the different positions and those kind of things.
You mean the total amount, the 5%?
So the 5%, yes.
So we won't know what each person is.
You will once you adopt the scale.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you don't have that presented today for us to vote on?
No, we're saying allocate the 5% to the classified pool, similar to what you did historically when you allocated 5% to the certified pool, it went into the scale.
Right, but we had a salary schedule to compare.
Right,
and that-
so, and if you're not prepared to do
I
that.
think it would be logical for us to see the impact so that we would know what we're voting for. I mean, we don't have the total amount. Do you have
No,
the total
you're
amount?
correct.
Just have a
The total amount is on the slide.
projected.
No,
thing,
that's
yeah.
the total, it's the total amount
Yeah,
that's on the slide.
1.3, whatever, it's there.
Yeah.
But we don't know how it is broken out by, for lack of a better word, step. Because you don't have steps in classified, do you?
W-
Is that
In the new,
term
Sarah,
you
if you can
use?
come over in next.
Well, anyway,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. I think you would have a better understanding and acceptance. We know the total amount, but how then it is actually distributed. I guess that's the need
Yeah,
for word.
no, that makes sense. I will, you can explain what our current system is and what we are moving to.
Sure. So good morning. Sarah Hamlin. So the previous schedule, there was some accurate information shared that historically, or at least in the past few years, staff have not moved along the scale similarly to they do on the certified side, where they get a column or a step for years of experience. But that is what we are going toward for the 24-25 school year. So the 5% to the pool, we are then going to take and allocate as we move from the old schedule to the new scale, placing each position, and I don't know that this has been brought up, but we are working with Educational Management Solutions on this. They're a consultant for us. And so we're working in coordination with them, and we have gotten some advice on our new schedule. And so we're taking our current positions and placing them on the new schedule. And then we're finalizing that right now, as Dr. Stubblefield said, and we'll be able to present that in June to you all.
So, Dr. Stubblefield, you're presenting not only a new amount, but also a new distribution plan based on what's the main criteria, experience that will be the criteria for that?
So each job has a description.
Right.
That has the requirements, but and I actually will turn it back over to Sarah. You always take into consideration, and most times, experience in education, depending on, or like certifications and like, Sarah can speak to that.
Okay.
So for the
But
class-
essentially, that's what you're doing. It's a new plan.
It's
Yes.
an actual classified salary schedule.
Schedule.
Because what we had was a scale, and then you placed people, and then depending on what the board allocated each year, there was no movement. It was just like you were here, and now you're going to get 2% or 3%. So it wasn't like,
So everybody just got the same percentage,
Right.
including
Yeah.
the new hires that were coming in.
yes.
So going forward, the positions so with the certified side, the positions are all kind of very similar as far as the complexity and the education required and the consequence of error and all of those items. On the classified side, the positions have different job functions, different complexities, different competencies, different level of education required for those positions. So you place the positions on levels on your schedule. And then as staff return from year to year, on that same level, they move over columns to recognize experience within the district. So then new staff come in based on their experience that's relevant toward the left side of the schedule. So they come in, there may be times where they come in at or above somebody who's currently here if their relevant experience requires it. But for the most part, your staff are moving through the schedule to allow new hires to come in, a column behind, so that they're not leapfrogging or not coming on at the exact same level that somebody who's been here with significantly more experience is currently earning. So we're trying to remedy some of that with this new schedule. We're going to. And the details of that are what we're going to present at the June meeting. But the 5% to the pool is what we are working within in order to place all of the positions and staff on that new schedule.
Thank you. Because once we see it, then there will be, there could be a further question, because previously, and I don't know if it has happened here, but is it an automatic movement? If like if you survive the year, you automatically move? Or do you have evaluations and within each range?
If you don't mind. Generally, what you would want to do each year as a board, if you approve 5%, for example, the first item as we work through the schedule would be to move returning staff one column, which recognizes that years of experience movement. Very similar thing to what we do on the certified side, where each year they get step movement in order to recognize their year of experience with the district. And so the first step is to move column movement, which is in the scale, which is a certain percentage. And then any additional percentage above and beyond the column movement, which recognizes your year of experience, goes to the base wage on the schedule so that we can keep up with the market.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing it.
Prior to that, what have we done?
So to my knowledge, and might be limited, but the last few years, the schedules that we have, staff haven't moved through those schedules like years of service. So the comments that you're receiving somewhat are accurate for the past, but we're moving away from that, where people would be placed on a certain pay range, and then that whole pay range increases by 5%, and the new people that are coming in are also placed on that same pay range, even if the current staff members now have an extra year of experience. So we're trying to remedy some of that. That's what we're trying to do by going to this new schedule.
No, I appreciate that, because that was a big issue that I kept getting
Yeah.
phone calls
Yeah.
from people, especially the administrative secretary position. Some people felt that they hadn't moved. There's no step. So
Right.
how is that happening? And then they're looking at other districts and saying, well, how does this work? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
So
we're
that-
we're trying to go
hopefully
to
that'll
something
help.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Mylan.
In general, for understanding on my take, I'm totally in compliance and agreement that salaries and pay scales must be attractive and inviting when we're talking about gathering and gaining new employees or individuals with their gifts and their talents and what they do. Here's my question: are the salaries competitive with other districts geographically and so forth to come up with the classified increase? Is that based upon other areas to be competitive? Because what I'm saying, if you're not competitive, you're not going to get qualified folk like you
Exactly.
want.
Yeah.
That's my take.
Yeah, so part of what Educational Management Solutions, our consultant, is helping us with is looking at the market. We've identified a few positions at this time that we are going to be reviewing and looking at the market for to make sure that we're in compliance with those. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time or capacity to be able to do that with all of our classified positions, which would be a pretty large undertaking. My thought is that we could continue that work year to year and identify several positions each year to be able to make sure that we're maintaining that our positions are paying a similar rate as the market, or if we need to adjust one way or the other, we can do so.
Great, and I'm sure you all have done the homework in the background to see what's feasible, so you won't lose folks with great capabilities and qualities, and that's
Right.
That's what we have to protect from.
Exactly, yeah. And that's part of where that base increase comes from. So not just
Right.
the column movement on the schedule, but increasing the base wage each year
Yeah.
keeps us competitive in the market.
Right, and to keep people, as Superintendent said, you on this, I'm very familiar with the steps, how individuals, experience and education is so very important. So why have experience in education when you apply if you cannot utilize it to enhance
Right.
what you do to be, to make the company or system better where you work at?
Yep, exactly.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mylan. Additional questions? Thank you, Sarah. Just trying to get a feel on the pulse of the board. I know there was a potential request if the board was willing to take action today, but if I'm hearing, kind of feeling some folks, there's been a request to maybe wait until the June 11th meeting, until the schedule is presented and shared with the board, and we've had time to actually review it. So I just want to make sure if that's the direction the board is feeling to go. And then also timing-wise, it wouldn't put us, I just want also just, what implications does that have?
I mean, June 11th still will, I'm looking at the people who make it happen. June 11th still will allow it
Thumbs
to
up.
go into impact July 1 without retro or delaying it, yes.
Perfect. So if the board is in agreement, and I'm looking at head nods around the table, we will not take any action. Again, the proposed increases are in the presentation today, so those are not changing, but the salary schedule will be shared prior to the June 11th board meeting for us all to review and then potentially act on or at least discuss at the June 11th meeting. Thank you. Okay, and then,
Before you leave that, something,
Yes.
that will include all classified.
All classified positions.
thank you, Dr. Nguyen. Okay. So just in regards to the budget that's been presented, any other questions from the board on the items that are listed in the presentation shared today?
I'm concerned still about health and nurses. I know they're still negotiating. When they had their first annual community roundup, February 7th, we all found out that 52% of our kids needed some sort of assistance from nurses, and we don't have enough people. I was a little confused by what we got in some of the reports we got, say that we're gonna fill our own, and we're struggling. That's why we were using the agency. I didn't get that part. It didn't make sense.
So to clarify, Ms. Lewis is here, and if I'm misspeaking, she can definitely come and, to clarify, our first priority is always to hire direct. What the question was around was why, within the budget, if we're hiring direct, is cheaper than the agency. So the goal would be able to hire direct, but they also have money to work with agencies when needed, but it was all in one line. If I'm misspeaking, then Ms. Lewis can come forward. But that was my understanding based off of what was shared.
I guess it's still confusing. We're saying we want to hire direct. We don't have enough people. We don't have the people. And then the budget was always, to me, messed up because they never had what they needed to do what they need. So how are we going to make that work? And then we need to, attendance is attached to our accreditation. And if the kids, we're dealing with their emotion, their physical health, and if it's not up to par, then they're not coming to school. So we need to make sure that we have an adequate number of people to fill those positions, whether they're RNs or LPNs, and then do we have enough at every building? You have Wyandotte that has 2,000 kids, and we don't have enough nurses there. And I think the laws are a little different. Somebody can help me out in terms of how much is required at every building. And we got to work this out. And our budget reflects what we think of our kids. I've heard you say, how are the children? Well, they're not well if we're not making sure we got
So,
what
Ms.
they need
Page,
for
can
the
I ask a
kids.
question? Are you proposing something? Because this is what,
Yeah, I want to make sure that we have nurses in the buildings, not the secretaries.
no,
The
and
nurses are
this,
actually in the
this
building.
current budget would allow that. A couple of things just to clarify, when some of the budget, the nursing budget was going over, there were some things that were being charged to that budget that should have gone to like special ed. And I think we've cleaned that up. Special ed has absorbed some of the cost of it for the students who have specific needs. So we believe that what we're presenting will address all that you are saying. And if we discovered that it is not, like based on our calculations for what people may come in at, what we need, the potential to have to hire agencies between the two departments, we believe that it can be done. The staffing allocations, if you look at their staffing sheets, we have more, when you look at the total number of staff, it's more than the number of buildings that we have. So when they look at the number of kids and when they look at the acuity level, they factor those things in.
So you're saying that we have enough nurses, right?
We have enough money allocated to
Okay.
do it.
But it just seemed like we're dragging our feet, to me, and it doesn't seem like we're really going after to get people to fill these slots.
I got a question. Okay, let me back up. Dr. Superintendent, you said this current budget will solve the issue. Okay, if the money is there and the finances is there, it seems to me another direction or something else has to be taken to get nurses to fill money that's allocated for us to have nurses. So I understand what you're saying, Sister Page, but this is just for clarity. I'm trying to understand it. So do we have to do something different on our end to get the nurses because we do have the money?
So-
I think I'm going to stop right there.
And I'll just, to kind of chime in the conversation. So if you look at the department budget for health services, right, the allocated dollars for 24-25 is a little over 3.4 million for nurses, and that would include 60 nurses, if I'm reading this correctly, to be allocated. Now, whether they're all filled or not, that's a different type of question, but the dollars, and they've increased from 2.7 million this current year, what was budgeted for nurses, for actual nursing staff, and has increased to 3.4 million for 24-25, and that probably includes some salary increases and whatnot. But if I'm reading this correctly, the dollars are allocated so that we have nursing, so that we can pay for nurses, to your question, Mr. Mylan.
Right.
So we can pay for the staff, so we've got the dollars to pay for nurses at every building.
Number one.
The other question is, how do we make sure that we're retaining and finding nurses to fill those positions? That's a different question. So the budget is actually allocated so that we can afford to pay for the nurses, to hire the nurses or to keep them. The second question is, what are we doing differently, I think, to Ms. Page's question, to make sure that we're going out and recruiting and hiring and finding the nurses to fill the positions internally rather than outsourcing to an agency. So I think that's a different type of question, an important one, because I think we always want to make sure we try to hire staff directly. So, but that's, I think, to your question, Ms. Page, is what are we doing to make sure that we have the actual staff hired rather than the agency nurses, or not have a staff person? But the budget is there so that we can have a nurse in every building, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, and this budget is reflective just for students, all students, and then within the special ed budget for those students who need whatever according to their IEP, that's not within this budget. It comes out of special ed. And so when you see the 60, that is just for the general population of students. And then whatever else is needed based on special circumstances is added and included within the special ed budget.
Well, can I ask Ms. Lewis, how many nurses do we need? You said 60, and then how many, we asked Dr. Laurie, how many do we need for SPED? So what would be the grand total?
I mean, she may have a prediction for SPED based off the number, but Ms. Lewis is there. 60 on the paper is, she did the budget. Every department created their budget, so that's what she is saying that is needed, is 60. SPED is based off the needs of the students, and it could be 10 one week and 5 the next.
Okay, but just a rough estimate, how many would you need?
When I'm considering, good morning,
morning.
Board. When I'm considering the special education needs, the nursing needs around some of our students currently, we look at the nursing needs in like a continuum of services. So CNAs, and sometimes we need LPNs, and sometimes we require RN. So if I just needed to provide an average amount of nursing staff at those different levels, I would say it'd be around 20.
Okay.
Thank you.
But that can change depending on the students that move in and move out.
Okay, because I did say an estimate.
Yes.
So I'm not trying to lock you in on
Yeah,
anything.
thank you, I appreciate
Okay.
that.
But I just want to make sure that we have, that this shouldn't always have to be a constant fight or debate, that we have the people there. Because if the kids are healthy, then that's going to improve our attendance numbers.
And I don't disagree with you, it's not a debate. I mean, you all have allocated money over time. They have presented it, so I don't think I think everybody's on the same page around that. And then at negotiations, you heard the ask for what the Health Services Department was asking, and that's being still discussed there. So I don't think it's a debate. No one is in disagreement or resisting it, and it's just a matter of, similar to teaching in every profession, we're competing with other districts and the hospital and everybody else that needs nurses. So that's just the reality, yeah.
Thank you. And if I'm also looking at the SPED budget here, and they do have, within their budget, and again, I know it's an estimate, and it's a moving target, as Dr. Lowry said, but they do budget and have within their budget a line item for nursing needs. So I think that's, again, that's a moving target and a budget, but I think that is, again, being considered in terms of what is needed. Again, the larger question, I think, Ms. Page, which is an important one, what are we doing as a district to make sure that we're retaining those nurses that we do have and able to hire where we do have vacancies? And I think that's across the board, right? Not just for nursing, but SPED and just our general, like, teachers and paras, every position. How do we fill those positions, and thinking differently? And I know HR continues to come up with different innovative ways and different places to go out and recruit. But even within departments, what are we doing to try to retain and attract those? So that's an important question, is how do we fill those vacancies? But the budget, in terms of the budget implications, the budget is there for, to be able to hire and pay for those nursing staff. So at least the way I'm reading the budget, it's allocated in the proposed budget.
Just a generic question. When, in the last column on some of these number of staff or health insurance costs, when it says 75 not feeling 5, so is that 70, or is that 75?
Ms. Kaiser's coming forward.
That would indicate they had 80 positions, and they're not going to fill 5 of the vacant ones, and will maintain 75 within the budget.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Say, Board, for our budget, I know there's a, to reduce our budget by 3%, I think the number is 15,000, but I also want to make sure that we consider, you know, I know the board has talked about, and we can discuss a bit further at some point, or, you know, I can come back with some recommendations if the board would like me to, or we can work through it today if we'd like, or at a different time. But if I, just thinking about the board's budget, we need to consider, we've talked about doing additional community engagement, like the Student World Cafes that we just had a week or two ago, community World Cafes to get community input on different initiatives and issues. So there may be some adjustments in the board budget that we need to make to allow for us to do those types of things, because I don't think they were necessarily in this last budget, or at least if we want to do them at a more regular frequency than the 1 or 2 that we had specifically for students this year. So if we do want to do that a little bit more frequently, we would probably need to allocate that. But we can work within the budget to move some dollars around, whether it's from, sorry, Mr. Goheen, from legal or from other line items to adjust appropriately so that we can make sure that we have the budget to do those types of things. That was the one that stood out for me, is we don't necessarily have that within last year's budget.
Wouldn't some of that money come out of another department? Because there was a lot of ESSER money that was supposed to have gone for community engagement. And we did some, and a lot of, so I don't know if there's some left over, and it comes from that, or some, I don't see it all coming from us. You would think it would come out of some student services.
So a couple of things about the ESSER, there's no ESSER money left over. Those community partnerships included our part, in which we had to like not continue them because they couldn't necessarily build them in the budgets, and some of them. So they include like Learn to Swim, we plan to continue, we plan to build that in the budget somehow. That included Thrive, BAM, WOW. There were some other, it's a whole list of community partnerships. So it wasn't just specific activities, it was long-term partnerships that were within the buildings. And in some cases, buildings have built some of those partnerships within their buildings when they found that it was helping to improve student outcomes, be it attendance or academics and those kind of things. So that, it was, if you look on there, it was $100,000 that's built into, that was built into the budget that you added. Out of ESSER, we were able to explore lots of community partnerships and then prioritize those ones where we saw like movement for students, and then some buildings forged relationships that they will continue with.
Under professional development, is there a parent segment that you're trying to help and assist parents?
So in the Welcome Center budget, that's where that parent engagement district-wide happens. But if you look at each one of the schools' budgets, specifically those schools that are title schools, they have a line item that is for family and student engagement, parent involvement and engagement. It's a specific line item on the schools' budgets.
So since we have the Welcome Center, then could not some of that money come from them to do some programming to help, not necessarily our budget, but it's there, and we need to utilize them.
So they do their programming. They've planned out like the programs that they're gonna have for the upcoming year. What happens is if you're saying in collaboration with their programming, you want to do X, it may change what they're doing, but when you're like, the board wants to host a student cafe or that kind of thing, it's not necessarily built into their budget for you all to host a student cafe. Like, they had an event a couple of weeks ago, and they had lots of families here, lots of community, but it was not what you all are asking. They were engaging at a different type of level. The schools do that also on a regular basis, but if this is specific, like the board wants to hear directly with the students, be involved, like, you're always welcome to those events, but they have events already. They have at least one event a quarter planned for next year where they are engaging families, and then the schools do their curriculum nights and other events when you follow their calendars. So all of those different departments have their planning and budgeting and allocating. They do not currently have money allocated for a board student cafe. World Cafe, yeah. Or if you are having a board listening and learning activity, that's not within their budgets. Now, and if you're saying we're gonna do it and we need to go back and further cut somebody's budget, that would be a directive we would need for the board, but it will shift what people already have planned and what everybody's already reduced their budgets at least 3%, in most cases it's more than that, when you look at the additional reduction, in order for us to get to be able to do all the things that were priorities. That's already been done. We're at a place now which it would be either you're not going to have any sort of operations, or you would be talking about people. We have, for the most part, been able to do everything through vacancies, reorgs, and really just doing things differently. And we don't know what that'll be like. We'll see next year, but we all think that it'll be okay at this point. But there will be some things that we typically maybe have done or allocated, like we reduced food and travel. So there will be some things that don't happen in order for us to accomplish these other things that are priorities.
So do we have a budget for what we spent at the cafe? Not do we have a budget, do we have the total amount?
I can give you a rough estimate. The box lunches, that was probably the most expensive part. They were $6 each. We ordered 150. The staff, like, you're not paying for staff time or security or anything. You're really paying for, like, the food. That's your largest cost for those things, is food, when you do it during regular hours or whatever, but yeah.
So essentially, Mr. Lopez, we know if we have one each semester.
We can plan for.
What the cost was, and then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can build that out. I just didn't want to bring anything forward without having the board have a conversation about what we want to see in the budget. And I can certainly go back and I can work with Leslie to get, like, hey, what was based on the rough cost? Would transportation be a cost for us, or since it was during the school day, would it be? not be?
Transportation is a cost.
It is a cost,
Yeah.
okay. So if we can get Leslie or Dr. Stubblefield, if we can kind of get an estimate of what it cost us to do that one. And then I know we had the one earlier with just the families, community members as well, maybe, and that was in the evening, so get a cost for that as well. And then we can work forward to put together, propose, like, hey, if we want to do once a quarter, 2 for students and 2 for whatever that might look like. So I can bring that back, certainly, but I didn't want to do it without
Right.
consensus from the
One
board.
of those fentanyl discussions, does that come out of security?
That was a student services, it was a joint activity with the police department and student services, so it was out of those, enough is enough, and it came out of those budgets. So those events are not charged to you. The ones specifically when you notice it as a board meeting are the ones, but Leslie should be able to give you the total cost for both of those, yeah.
I think there's always opportunities, Ms. Page, like when the Welcome Center or when Health Services does something, or, SPED or Student Services, as they host events, I think there's always opportunities for us to maybe informally get data and information and feedback from students and parents or whoever's attending. So certainly I think that, to your point, like, yes, I think we can do that. And if we want, as a board, to get specific items or host specific events, I think that's where it would come out of our budget if we're saying, hey, the board wants to host a student cafe. And so what I'll do is I'll take this information and create kind of what that might look like, a proposed budget if we're doing it quarterly.
No, I was just trying to figure out, is there any other department you could take that from? Because I know people are planning, and that says to us too, if we're going to do these things, because I thought the student cafe was good, but it may not have been beneficial to do it at the end of the year. We did it too quickly, and you got to plan it better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think having a little bit more time, and if we're scheduling it out, and I think as we think about our reorg meeting in July, if we already have an idea thinking, hey, we want to do these quarterly, when we're putting out the schedule for board meetings for the year, would it be beneficial to say, hey, we're taking action and saying we want to do these quarterly, so at the reorg meeting, if we have dates proposed or something, just thinking out loud, right, that might be something we can do.
Let me keep thinking out loud. The training for like the board clerk, that is not included in the KSB membership. Just maybe looking ahead, they shouldn't be very expensive, but I don't know.
There are some that's included, and then there are some that's an additional charge. So sometimes the meetings are like, anybody can go, you can get online and do it.
Yeah, sometimes they're virtual, but sometimes they're travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll make sure that we add that.
Beneficial.
Are there any other items, board, if you were looking, I've got our board budget up, just as I'm thinking about putting together a proposed budget to share with everyone. I know we talked during our retreat about other items and professional development and what that would look like, and travel and what that looks like, and some of the other registration, other line item costs, but anything else that you all want to share as a board collectively? And let me make sure I can see Yolanda's face in case she's got.
Just because, is her hand
Nope,
up?
she's, Ms. Clark, did you have? No, she's shaking her head no. Dr. Nguyen?
No, I'm good with what's been said. Thank you.
Just because I'm sitting next to the lawyer. What did how did we work out that compliance officer? We no longer have that, right?
No, you do. You met Mr. Marcus McLaughlin a few board meetings ago. So we did feel that he's still here. He's actually probably working on stuff now, but he's still here. He's still here, yes.
Okay, so has that, and, Greg, you can talk for yourself, has that lessened the amount of minutia that we had referred to you? Which then would mean you don't have as much billing.
I think two things are true. There are some minutia that doesn't go to Greg, but I will say the number of legal requests this year, and Ms. Smith can tell you, she can compare it to last year. There are some things that automatically go to Greg, like when we're serving stuff. But it has lessened the, just quick day-to-day, that kind of thing.
Great.
And then prior to when Casey was in the position, and now Marcus, will run stuff through them, and by the time Greg he's looking at final copy, so it's not as much back and forth. So that kind of thing has been cleaned up, and then some of the day-to-day stuff he can handle where we would normally have to reach out to Greg, but then there are other things that
Only
Greg. Yeah.
And I think to that point, that's a great point, Dr. Nguyen. I think there's some other pieces that we can probably, those day-to-day pieces, I believe right now, anytime we run policies, Karen from Greg's office is still being asked to do the red line version and a final version. I think we can pull that in-house and have Ms. Smith really work through that. And that, I know that's not a big item, right? But it decreases something.
At $385,000 an hour, it does.
Absolutely. So those types of things, if we can find those areas where we bring it in-house and Ms. Smith can do the final drafts rather than having to go back and forth with Ms. Karen.
I mean, that's what budget review is for.
Absolutely.
For efficiencies.
So, well, board, if you I can definitely work through this, and again, we're being asked for a 3% reduction, which is about 15,000, but also taking into consideration some of these other items around the hosting cafes for students and community and what that looks like. I can come back if you would like and put something together and share out via email with everyone. I can work with Ms. Smith to make sure we get that put together and then sent out to everyone.
But currently, what we're looking at reflects the 15,000 reduction. No?
Well, no,
No,
it does not.
Why not?
Because-
we had to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, so every department went through and did their 3%, and so we have to do, so I can do that and get that back to the board pretty quickly based on the conversation.
And of course, how you know you can additionally do it by getting some hard cost on registrations, because these are just general.
Yeah, based on what we've paid for registrations for this year, and, you know, I think there's some that we know already for next year.
And Dr.
that-
Stubblefield said some memberships come with one,
Correct,
so
yeah.
you may have to decide, not, 7 don't go to X.
Right, yeah.
Got it.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the board budget? Thank you, it's been helpful, and I'll come back with something for the board.
Mr. Lopez, can I just ask a quick question?
Yes, Ms. Clark?
And I think I know the answer is no. I just want to double check. Like when public comments come before us, there's never a time when I don't think that ever is costing the board anything on any of the action that we have to take. I just want to make sure, because that's my assumption.
I don't believe so. I think staff internally, leadership team reaches out, and if there is anything that would require action, it'd have to come back before the board. So as far as just the follow-up, Dr. Stubblefield, I wouldn't think there's any.
No, unless you actually take action, and I'll give an example. A few years ago, it wasn't based, may have been based off public comment. My first year, you did say add additional police officers. So in that type of thing, when you get information and you make a recommendation, that does, but it's not coming from your budget. You were allocating it to another budget.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought, if it had to take action, but I just wanted to double check and be sure. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Clark.
One other question, I guess this is a Tracy question. Are there any categories that are not included, categories of expenditures that are not identified?
In the board budget specifically?
budget.
Okay.
In the board budget, not that I'm aware of.
Okay,
The only thing I will point out, though, is that you do have bond costs this year. As of January or whatever that date was, there has obviously been additional costs since then in advertising and printing and mailing and things like that. But that is something that has to be charged to your budget, but
Okay.
it won't be, typical cost, so.
what is that cost? Do you know that cost?
I do not. I know it was about 10,000 in mailing at one point. I don't know if we received the invoice yet for what the election cost. And then we'll also have the printing costs for all the flyers and information that we sent to the schools and to families.
And what is the election cost?
I am not sure. We
Okay.
haven't received the invoice for that. I'm not sure.
So those come out of,
They'll be charged to your budget just for tracking purposes, but we know that's going to put the board's budget over because that wasn't anticipated at the beginning of the year.
okay, so are we putting that in for next year's budget?
So if that will be, and then a few board members asked, reached out to me and said, what are we planning to do for next steps in regards to the bond? Since we said we would have the conversation, my recommendation was you all make a decision at our July 2nd board retreat on what that will look like, and you can make that determination at that time. I wasn't making assumptions. We weren't making
Right.
assumptions.
Right, but we need the cost.
Yes,
So you'll have the cost
yes.
by
we should
then.
have-
Yes, we would.
We should.
Good.
If you could, Tracy, Ms. Kaiser, if once you get those costs, if you wouldn't mind letting Leslie know or myself so I can put that within the budget so we can see it. And then Leslie, if you wouldn't mind pulling just, and I don't know, this might be it, but the most up-to-date budget kind of year-to-date where we're at with expenses. And then I'll work with you to kind of see, again, I know one of the issues was how we were, what we were where we were placing expenditures within line items and sometimes, so just to make sure that we're cleaning that up some and knowing what we're spending, to Dr. Nguyen's point about how much we're going to spend on registrations and KSB fees and all that type of thing. So if you and I can connect, just to kind of get an updated budget for the board and then work through a draft for next year.
I have a question. It said 3,000 for advertising. That wasn't, and then there's another category for the bond. So what was the other 3,000? What did we spend on?
BC 24 bond.
So it looks like we have not, if I'm looking at the budget as of 1/29, we had not spent any of those $3,000. Is that right, Ms. Kaiser?
That is correct.
So
I
we
don't
have
know what
not
it is
spent
today.
anything on advertising,
Okay.
from that line item anyways.
Okay. But what would we have spent it on? Is it just whatever we chose to advertise and print? It had nothing to do with the bond, that particular 3.
Correct. So like if you were putting out advertisement about the World Cafe, the Student Cafe, anything that you were hosting, that's where it would have been charged to. I don't think we put out any paper thing, so any electronic thing that we shared, Bright Arrow, whatever, there's no cost to that. But if you were doing flyers and that kind of thing, so some of what the advertisement it can be charged to that, so that'll make it less negative. But for the events you did, I don't recall you doing any mailing
Okay.
or paper copies.
Probably for the budget, where we have to put it into the local newspaper, we probably have to pay for that, so I'm guessing that may come out of that.
That actually comes out of the fiscal
Oh, okay.
services budgets.
Okay,
Mhm.
perfect.
And then the miscellaneous, what are some of those things? We didn't spend as much. What did we spend on?
I'd have to look at last year's budget. I think we had some line items out there of what that included, but I don't recall offhand. I have to look those up.
Yeah. So Leslie, if we could maybe get, and I know you, monthly, I think you send kind of any invoices that we're getting based on line item. If maybe we could pull that together, just so we can kind of see what's been spent in those, like the miscellaneous and other line items, if you wouldn't mind pulling that, Leslie. Thank you.
And Ms. Kaiser, I'm sorry,
No, you're fine.
do we pay for the election of board members election?
I don't think there's any cost to that. I think it
cost?
is I'm
county
not
picks up
100% sure,
that.
but don't the people who are running pay some sort of filing fee? And then I don't think there's any cost to the district
No
that I'm
cost?
aware of.
Okay,
No, that I'm not.
Thank you.
I think so.
Thank you, Board. If there are any other questions or items, please send them my way. I'll work on this and try to get something back to you all relatively quickly, not before Monday, I promise.
Oh, no, we want it Monday.
Okay, so, Board, I think we're open for general questions around the budget overall. Didn't sound like there was any other information being shared by staff, so at this time, we really just are open to general budget questions. You've got all the department budgets in front of you. You've got the presentation of how the dollars are being proposed, recommended to be used so that we do have a balanced budget moving forward for 24-25. So I'll, again, open it up for questions on these items.
well, just kind of, just the next in line. Is there a way, and I'm looking at, nutrition, food service, and we seem to always have and I know there's a reason, but a high cost of, for lack of a better word, day labor. I don't know what, labor max or something like that. Dr. Stubblefield, is there any plans for professional development or something for nutritional workers?
Yes, Ms. Rushi is coming forward to talk about the adjustments that are being made for that. They do have professional development, but she can answer like we're doing to address the agency and what we're doing to build the capacity of the staff.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr.
Good morning.
Stubblefield and Board. Currently, we are trying to establish a sub-pool internally, so we rely less on Labor Max technical services.
I'm sorry, could you speak a little bit closer? Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
We're currently trying to establish a sub-pool, trying to move away from using temp service. We have a lot of absenteeism within the department, and it's fairly common and normal, expected.
Right.
When that happens, that's when we rely on Labor Max.
Right.
We've slashed the budget quite significantly this come around.
Okay.
Well, I have a question with that. With our HR, are we going out trying to recruit people? Because when you look at what we paid the Labor Max, that's a lot. And just, you would think there's a lot of people in town that need a job.
Yeah, so the HR, and we put it in the end of the week, they do classify hiring fairs throughout the year. We've gone to churches, we've gone to other places that they have invited us. We also encourage our employees, if they know people, refer people. And so, yes, they do intentionally go out and try to recruit individuals, and they continue to be creative around what that recruiting looks like. But they do fairs on a, specifically or classified on a regular basis, and go to there are a lot of, oftentimes, community career fairs, like organizations will get together, and we participate in those. And often are able to hire people. Unfortunately, within that group, it's just high turnover for various reasons.
Because in talking to some people in the community, some who have gone in and worked, they question the way we manage and the way we do things, that sometimes that creates a problem in terms of keeping good people.
Yeah.
I'm just saying what was told to me, because I asked some people who.
Was that recently? I know when I first came on, but I think if you look at our attrition rate in nutritional services within the last year, we have not had the turnover that we've had historically.
Okay, because I've just talked to some people this year who did go, who I thought were pretty good workers, and they just felt just the way some things are managed, no offense, but they just said there's some going-ons that you're not going to keep anybody who really is in the business of doing quality work.
So I will say this, on Tuesday, you will see one of our employees of the month is somebody who's been in the district 45 years in nutritional services and who has trained several of the staff. So while that may be true for them, it does not mean that, people leave for different reasons, but we will be recognizing somebody who's been here for 45 years. Is it 40 years? It's several, my number's may be-
45.
45. She's actually been here 45 years. She's a manager at one of our middle schools. And we have several staff that's like that. So if two things can be true, I will say, like, the turnover rate within the last year has decreased greatly, which is why we're able to talk about establishing a sub-pool and move away from the agencies, because it has stabilized a great deal.
Well, that's good, but I'm just putting out what was told to me, and they felt that we could do better if we tighten up the ship.
Ruchi, while I have you up here, any new and exciting food items for next year, or that you can foreshadow for any students that might be listening, because you know they're listening,
Absolutely.
That we need a sample.
We have several new items
that
coming.
you can share if you can't share, if it's a secret?
Well, the only reason I'm hesitant to share is we have moved from our current prime vendor to a new prime vendor, and we're waiting on prices to establish the menu and finalize it. So I don't want to put out, hope and take that away.
Well, you,
So I will say this, the students on my advisory group, which are 9th through 12th graders from all of the schools, our April meeting, were we there in April?
Yes.
Our April meeting was at Nutritional Services, and they sampled lots of things, and they vetoed some things, and they gave some things a thumbs up. So we did have a tasting. It was about 20 of them that gave feedback, and they also gave feedback on, like, pairings. Like, they were like, don't put spicy chicken up against taco bowl, or it was something, because those are the two favorites, and they were like, make sure they're not served on this. So they gave lots of feedback around those kind of things.
if you're doing any tastings this summer, you let me know, and
Will
I will
do.
be there. I've got some youth groups that I can take, and they are honest, I promise you, so.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Board, any other departments that you want to have questions on? If not, I know we have those items for the purchasing policy of under 20 that we might be able to get to as well.
Just kind of, again, moving down the line, for operations and maintenance, because there will be emergencies, deferred maintenance items that will need to be addressed, does the budget, I don't see Mr., Tracy question again. You're doing the heavy lifting today. Thank you. Did we take that into account?
Yes, I know, I don't want to speak for Doug, but I know that there is money that is allocated every year, knowing that something's going to come up. We also have some emergency funds in the COO budget, and then we would always rely on capital outlay if something major happened
Okay.
that we weren't anticipating.
Because we already know where the cracks are in the concrete.
Right,
All right.
right. Yeah, and that's planned for every year. I think a lot of it would be if something more important came up, more emergency situation, we may have to shift funds and do a little bit less of something to accomplish whatever needed to be done immediately.
And Dr. Stubblefield, this is an off question, but fire system, where does that, is that?
Are you
fit into-
referring to, like, what happened at
Yeah,
Slagle?
outage and damage.
So that would be something that was not anticipated, and so where they allocate for that, if the funds are still there, they go there. If not, they have to go to, like, capital outlay or that kind of thing.
So we're,
It- So somebody, whatever is needed is being shipped, and they'll install it, and hopefully that will fix it. But they're in progress. We just got an email update this morning about
and
that.
Sumner as well, has that been repaired?
Sumner has been repaired, yeah,
So, and this probably will happen with another storm.
possibly.
Here in Tornado Alley. Okay, thank you for that one. You want to go ahead and come back to them, Mr. Lopez?
Yeah, if there are no other questions on any of the department budgets, what we can do, board, is, and again, apologies that we didn't include this before this morning, but the finance committee had met several times and had discussed the purchasing policy or purchasing process for those purchases under $20,000. And thank you, Wayne and Brad and Mr. Lilly, Tracy, for working through all of that, and finance committee members. So I see it on the list here that Leslie pulled over.
Where is it?
Yeah, if you refresh
Yes.
your board docs, it's there now. It's at the very bottom.
Yeah, if you haven't refreshed in a while, just refresh. What we can maybe do, if you want to take a quick 7 minutes, come back at 10:30, stretch your legs, take a quick break, and that will allow you to take a break and maybe pull up those policies or those procedures. And then at 10:30, we can reconvene, and Dr. Nguyen, you can
Right.
lead that conversation. Thank you. go ahead and resume. Before we get to the purchasing, there was a question that came up, and I will try to ask, it's specific to TIS, and if I don't get it correctly, Ms. Page, just chime in. So in the budget, and I don't have it pulled up here, the question is around TIS staffing, and if the staffing that's being budgeted, if that is sufficient to what is needed. There was a question around whether we needed to increase staffing within TIS, and is that reflected in the budget, or is that not reflected? So I want to make sure I asked that correctly, Ms. Page. So just want to make sure that the staffing that's reflected within the budget for TIS is reflective of increased staffing or just current staffing, or is there still going to be a need for additional staff?
I'm looking to Mr. Holda, if he can't answer that, we can get you there. My understanding is, we had openings that weren't filled, and there were some shifts and stuff to make sure we had more, direct help at the help desk, but he's coming forward, he's gonna speak about that.
And then while Mr. Hoda is coming, just board, Ms. Russell and Leslie, Ms. Russell has joined us, so just wanted to note that she has joined us.
Good morning, Board.
Good morning.
So we had a few open positions that were not filled, and we converted those positions to hire more techs, and we're doing interviews this week and next week to fill those positions, starting July 15th.
And I asked that because when you had come to us before, you said you only had 20 people. And it seems like the biggest group you needed was for the tech repairs. So I didn't know if you would increase your numbers, because you showed us data from all the other districts. And did you increase those numbers to assist when, you know, the laptops or whatever we're using messed up?
So we didn't increase the number of positions directly. We just, some of those were higher paid positions that we converted to hire 4 more.
So that only gives you 24.
No, we had 36 people before.
So the 4 will help you do the job. The numbers aren't a problem anymore.
So Ms. Page, just to clarify, the numbers are an issue, but it would be several $1 million. So they're doing some restructuring, some streamlining, and then in the next year, they would be able to figure out where the gaps are. So they're doing some internal things. It's just not within this budget. They are just like recalibrating, but they are adding 4 by converting there were some positions that were higher paid that have been open for a very long time that we could not fill, so this is part of what they're doing. And then, so, and they sent that, we can send a more detailed update around some of the other things that, you know, the action that you took regarding that would have included some positions, but a different decision was made. So we can send an update in written form on what their structure is and how it is, and then they will evaluate all of those things. And if more positions need to be added, they would be planning for the next budget year.
In that information, can you also provide that structure that you all shared around the similarities of other districts? Because did I hear you say they had 36 people and they are adding 4 more, so that makes 40? Is that what you said?
Yeah, but the 36 did not include the vacant positions.
It didn't include.
Okay.
The vacant.
Okay.
The positions we were not able to fill in the past.
Okay, so will you still share the comparison that you showed us previously about other districts, to Ms. Page's point, but also, will you also tell us what Dr. Stubblefield just shared?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I can share that with you this afternoon.
Okay. I was going to say by the end of next week, but if you have it this afternoon, we'll include it.
It's pulled up.
Thank you. Additional questions on TIS? Yes, Dr. Nguyen.
Mr. Lopez, do you want to, now that Ms. Russell has joined us, we're fully staffed. do you want to just continue to go through the budget?
Sure.
Since that now everything is there, at the very bottom are the 20,000 purchases, the last three documents, last three files are now there, and board members can read them. So do you want to just continue to go through the budget itself?
Through which, the
Department budget.
department budget, so go by department?
Yeah, I mean,
The
so
departments, yeah.
maybe other, I mean, I know people have some question on the welcoming center, blah, blah.
Sure. No, and absolutely. So I thought I'd open it up for any of the departments. So yes, we can go through any of the departments. If there are specific questions on any of the departments, absolutely, now would be the appropriate time to bring up those questions. So before we get to the purchasing piece, then let's go ahead and welcome Ms. Russell. So we've discussed some of the, specifically the Board of Education budget. There was a brief presentation on a balanced budget that was shared by administration. We have not taken, just trying to catch up Ms. Russell here, we have not taken any action on any items today. On June 11th, staff will share the recommended new salary schedule for classified that will come, or before June 11th, it'll be on that board meeting for us to review and then potentially take action at that time. So no action is being requested today or taken today. So right now, if there are other questions on any of the department budgets, would open it up for that. We did go through a couple of them, but we can revisit any of the department budgets that anyone has questions on. So I'll open it up. Anyone?
So I had and I apologize, Randy. I appreciate that. I think my couple of questions based on the question responses is and I know that you guys have been talking about TIS, so I'm happy to follow up with Dr. Stubblefield in our meeting on Tuesday. But one of my bigger questions is, so it said the budget increase was due to the mitigation process being more than expected, or costing more or something. I didn't really quite understand that response of the mitigation or migration or something costs more, but didn't that go through a bidding process and board approval? So even if it costs more, how does that, I was trying to understand the response to the reason why the TIS budget was increased. And I don't think I clearly understood
So
that.
it was saying the repair for the M1s, which are the MacBooks, is that correct, Rashid? That cost has gone up. So that's the anticipated cost of what it will cost to repair stuff. So when we haven't bidded anything out, the repairs are through Apple. And when they do come to the board and you vote on them at that time. Like all of the things that are in the budget is the anticipated cost for in order for us to function next year. If that makes sense, if I'm understanding your question right.
Yeah, and I can go back because it also says that there's already $500,000 in repair dollars. So the increase in the budget, but there's already, in my opinion, substantial dollars already allocated, even based on the repair. Going back to my statement before, I can follow up on that. I have questions and concerns about the TIS budget and its suggested increase. My other question and concern, going back to the fine arts and athletics budgets, I don't think my intention by elevating, or the other board members, by elevating the fact that we wanted more investment in fine arts and athletics was that the fine arts and athletic department heads go back and try to work out some of the things that community members as well as buildings have been asking for. I think I was asking for a substantial increase in the budget. I don't know if that was everyone else's, but that was my intention by elevating the needs of fine arts and athletics. And so I am a little disappointed that here we are allowing TIS to increase their budget after a reduction, but we did not give substantial supports to fine arts and athletics. And So I am not in agreement with the choices that were made. I don't know about the conversations that were had with those heads, but that was not my expectation when I had said, hey, I want us to invest more in fine arts, that they go find whatever they need addition in their budget already. Their budgets are all, in my opinion, small compared to the number of athletes and fine art, the lack of fine arts. That is my tangent and the thing that I am advocating. I would like to see us invest more dollars in those departments and not have an expectation that they figure out how to work it out. That was what I took from that response as well.
So a couple of things, they did speak to like coaches, athletic directors, and the people who carry out the fine arts, and the things that they were requesting, wanting, were all taken into consideration. When they looked at their budgets and how things, because both of them were new to the position, so historically, people prior to them made decisions based off of whatever the information. So after both Ms. Burns and Mr. Simmons lived in it within a year, they were able to, from their perspective, will be able to do those things that people have been requesting, plus some of the additional things, and this is where they landed based off of their budget. So that was my understanding how the process, when they were evaluating, like some decisions were made before they came in, so they had to live with it, but they, as the leader, are making different decisions going forward, and it should allow for what is needed in those areas. They weren't told to work it out. They just were looking at the budget and trying to do what was fiscally responsible while addressing those needs.
Quick question on, I guess, sticking with the athletic budget. I noticed that there's nothing allocated for repairs and maintenance services. Curious if that is coming out of a different budget to help maintain or repair any of our, or what that would have referred to. Just want to make sure. And again, I know if we're making different decisions, that impacts other budgets, and we've got to find dollars in other spaces, right? But just want to make sure if there needs to be something allocated there, or if that comes from somewhere else. Ms. Kaiser.
Yes, I was just looking at it. It looks like that may have been a carryover line from several years ago. They may have, at some point in time, had something budgeted in that line, and so that's why the budget line is created and set up. But we would use either capital outlay or other funds to do repairs and stuff for that.
Okay,
department.
thank you.
Yes. Mhm.
So that was what I thought might have been the case about using other funds, but I just wanted
Yes,
to be sure.
because we did only create the athletic director budget probably 3 years ago, is when we established that, and we just took funds from all the other departments who had been supporting those costs and created a specific budget for the athletic director. So I think that line probably just carried over from somewhere, yeah. But we do have the funds elsewhere, yes.
Great, thank you. And I guess just to piggyback off Ms. Russell, I think it's, given where we're at financially and trying to provide a proposed balanced budget, but thinking about athletics and fine arts, I know that was part of the conversation with the community and around the bond, and like where we might be able to do some things differently, as we think forward, both next year and in 5 years, 10 years, I guess, and maybe this is part of what Ms. Russell was saying or not, but just for me, like I'd be interested to hear to learn a bit more about like what, and again, I know it goes back to money, right? But if we're thinking down the road, like what are we missing, or what's kind of that vision that we need to do for athletics and fine arts and investments to elevate and lift up and, bring us to where we need to be, and also set us up for, success and being competitive in athletics and just having the success and things that we need in the fine arts. And I know it can't all be addressed in 1 year, but, those conversations happening within those departments, and it sounds like those conversations have happened and are happening, with Mr. Simmons specifically being in there in a short time, like thinking about what that might be. But, thinking outside of these line items, what else is missing, or where would we, if he were to say, or if they were to say, hey, we could wave my magic wand, here's where I would invest more, and this is what it would look like in the next 3 to 5 years. And that might help us think forward about budgeting, especially if we want to invest a bit more in these two specific departments. Ms. Russell, so going back to your point, like, how do we dream and think about what we could do differently in these two and invest a bit more? So again, nothing that requires any response, but just thinking about where we need to go with that and where would the funds come from? I know they'd have to come from somewhere.
Well, is someone going to answer that?
No, it wasn't for,
The same idea with transportation that we asked Mr.
Martin?
No, Doug, with the one at the last board meeting, purchasing the larger truck. That, usually we plan out with transportation, like, when are we due to buy new buses? When are we due to buy, what vehicles are going to go to the graveyard? And so those are concerns, legitimate concerns, that while we're doing it year by year, those are considerations I'm sure Dr. Stubblefield.
Yeah, so I will say for all of the things that the school provides, like uniforms, the equipment and stuff, there's a cycle, like every year, like this group may be getting new uniforms. So that exists. I can have Mr. Simmons, we can put it in the end of the week, next week, so you can see, like, this is the uniform cycle, and have for music equipment, they have a cycle as well. So that's how they make sure that this year we may be replacing instruments bought in this year, or trombones. They have an internal cycle that those things are currently happening. So to provide the basic things that the students need to perform and compete, that exists. Now, what I think I hear Ms. Russell and Mr. Lopez is saying is, like, what is, like, the pie in the sky, and what does that look like, and how much is that? In some ways, they have within this particular budget, like, adding the ability to do the broadcast and to have that was built into the budget, but and being able to do some of the other things, but I don't know what is left off the list, because this is what they came back with for this year, but it doesn't prevent them from specifically engaging with students and families and stuff over the course of the next year to see what that is. I will say there are some things based off KCKPS that we cannot do, that in other districts, their booster clubs do. And so I think sometimes that's conflated with the district doing it. And I will also say in other districts, from football to basketball to whatever, for every sport, they have multiple uniforms, and we always hear about that. But in a lot of cases, those parents or the booster club or somebody, when they start the season, or with band, when they have they're writing checks from anywhere from $300 to $500, from cheerleading to dance to whatever. So then, like, if you look at our cycle, and most school cycles, we're on the same cycle. The difference is what the booster clubs and the parent clubs then come in and do in addition to that. And those are significant costs, because those checks are being written to those parent booster clubs per sport to add some of those additional things.
Dr. Stubblefield, I appreciate that, and I think that's kind of, yes, that's important. For me, I also look at the equity in all of our programs, specifically elementary orchestra. We have some elementary orchestra buildings where they have 4th and 5th graders can participate. And then we have some buildings where it's just 5th graders can participate. And then they go into middle school not ever having, because if you didn't join in some buildings, if you didn't join in fourth grade, you can't participate in fifth grade. And so just even like, what is that structure to where we get to those places? Is it we need to put more people in the budget for those programs to be equitable, so that everyone who wants to access orchestra at fourth or fifth grade can do that? So that's just
Yeah. No, and we can provide that. It's really based on size and the number of sections that are at that those particular schools. So we can definitely look at that, and that can be a larger conversation, because that would be.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, so, because that would be additional cost, and it would impact scheduling to a certain extent. So that is something I see both Dr. Campbell and Dr. Washington nodding, so they could come back and say, if you did this, this would be the impact, the cost, what happens with the schedule.
Yes, and I was just going to say, and I apologize that I'm having bad reception. I was just going to say the same for the theater programs. We have some elementary schools that have some amazing theater programs, but we don't have other buildings who don't have access for whatever reason. And I don't know how all of those things are made up, but people talk about they would like for their kids to have that experience. And so how do we ensure that whatever we're doing, that there's some type of base level? And I think that's where I come from. How do we make sure it's in the budget, that if we have the funds, that those things are an option? So thank you for the conversation.
Thank you.
My question, do we have booster clubs?
Some schools have like PTA. I know actually some of them do have like boosters clubs, but I can think of one in particular.
So not all do.
No, and that is really driven by parents and parents organizing to do that. It's not prohibited.
Okay, but some, I guess my question is, if that is a significant component to provide additional resources, can we ask the athletic director or the principal to at least reach out and not expect parents to volunteer? Or, I don't know, again,
Yeah,
how do you make it grow, I guess, that's the question.
So I think.
Yeah, Dr. Nguyen, I would echo that. I think one of the things is we need someone who's willing to like organize an informational night. That is, how do you start a booster club? How do you start a parent organization group? Because I think that's where there's a lot of confusion. Is like, how do I start? And I think people need support in that area, to your point. Thank you.
We have noted it, and we'll discuss who are the most appropriate people to advertise that and provide that information. And it may be partnering with another district who has vibrant booster clubs to come in and actually lead the session on how they get started, because I don't necessarily know, unless our employees are people who have done it, if we would necessarily know all the ins and outs. So we've noted it, and we can discuss it.
And I guess a great question, is there prohibition for corporations, companies to fit in that slot?
You mean by like sponsoring stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want our kids to have Tyson chicken on their uniforms. They can have Nike, but.
No, there's no prohibition on us reaching out to corporations.
And, I'm going to mess up the name. The law firm every year, these Pasquale law firm every year donates to our athletic programs. There's nothing that prohibits it, but we have to make sure that we follow like KCKPS and some of those components around there, where booster clubs and things they just do different things, but we can get more information about that. There are districts that have policies and guidelines around booster clubs and what they do. So we can pull some of that and have an information night at the schools if people are willing to do that. In addition to booster clubs, not all of our schools honestly have PTAs either. So it's those kind of parent or community organizations that when you see a lot of the extra things that they are driving, those things based off of what they are doing as well.
Well, Dr. Stubblefield, I thought I saw Mr. Goheen about ready to say that his law firm would donate a sizable donation to our school
least
district. The words were about to
$385,000.
come out of his mouth. So go ahead, Mr.
Well,
Goheen, say it.
in fairness, we do donate quite a bit to the foundation, but what I was going to say to Dr. Stubblefield is the one other thing you've got to be a little careful about with like corporate donations is you don't want like a cigarette company to donate
Yeah.
or a liquor store or something like that. So it does, there are some limitations on what you'd want to go out and seek, but that's what a lot of districts do. That a lot of districts do as part, usually through their foundation or their booster clubs, or alumni clubs. And those three
It's alumni,
organizations are your typical fundraisers outside of the school district itself. They're a lot more active than our district is in that regard.
And then I will say the foundation also partners with both the fine arts and the athletic departments and provide lots of things, however they can support. They do support, our foundation does that as well. And sometimes people will make donations to the foundation and say, this is what I wanted. So our foundation does support in that way currently.
Question. So if this is legal and it's law-abiding and all of that, under what Greg just said, how can the information get to the community or to the organizations whom to contact to start a booster club or PTA to get it for the inception of it? Who should they contact?
That's what
What's the
we are-
starting point?
That's what
That we'll be
we're gonna
discussing now? Okay.
discuss internally so that we can have an information night around that.
When we going to put this, try to get this going?
We need to discuss it to figure out a timeline, because there are lots of,
I'm
yeah.
just throwing it out.
Yeah, so I don't want to like
we
throw
talk,
out-
we talking and, you
Yeah,
know, say.
I understand that, I just don't want to throw out a date that's not realistic for the individuals who would have to carry it out, so we can provide an update,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
Thank you. Any additional questions on, while we're on the athletics or fine arts? Are there other questions on other departments?
On the phone, sir.
I don't have any additional questions. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the team for making some hard choices. When you look at budgets compared from last year to this year, some teams took some hits in some areas and really worked to get to the board's goal. And so I just wanted to share my appreciation. I know that's never an easy task. Some people, I won't say it was easy, but they did some things and made it work. And so I appreciate that. I do just have one follow-up question around the columns to the right. When it says the transportation or the out-of-district travel and food, I'm not correlating those two columns to any of the budgets, but then when I got the numbers of how the additional dollars were utilized, the like 64,000 and the 20-something thousand were included, but I'm not sure how those numbers were cut out of the budget when I still saw them in the department budgets, if that question makes sense.
Ms. Kaiser's coming to explain.
Yes, Ms. Russell, what we did was we took what was in their out-of-district travel budget and their other food cost budget, and those are the ones that are highlighted in orange at the top, and then the reduction in green, and then I went back into their budgets and reduced those line items by those amounts for travel and food. Does that answer your question?
No, and I apologize, I'm about to pick on Dr. Stubblefield. So, in Dr. Stubblefield's budget, I think it says 10K for out-of-district travel or something. In your line or something. In your line item, you reduced it by 6,500, let's say. However, when I look at the total budget for all of the department budgets, it still includes her entire budget amount. So I don't know why it's being added back in on the bottom part.
I am not sure where you're saying,
So our overall district budget of 296,
okay,
that's in the overall budget amount, like the overall total budget amount. That encompasses your entire budget. However, she's saying that 6,500, I think, that she took out of your thing, out of your number, when she adds in the new money, she's then taking that and putting it back in your budget. But I see that as double because the 296 already encompasses that.
she's not putting it back into my budget. It's like that, the individual sheet, and which sheet are you looking at? You're talking about the cover sheet with everybody's budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
If I could say maybe, if I'm understanding your question, so yes, the superintendent's budget started off as 454,000, and was, because of raises and inflation, was over budget 22,860. And so then we reduced that deficit of 22,860 by $837, $500 reduction in travel, and $137 reduction in food. So that budget is still over budget, but it is down less than the 637. And so then the other areas are going to have to absorb those smaller budgets, smaller departments that weren't able to reduce without impacting staff. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I'll bring my math on Tuesday to Dr. Stubblefield. I apologize. I know it's hard to explain without me like pointing to the thing. I apologize.
No, I think what you said makes sense. It didn't get added back into my budget, like my travel cost still was reduced, but I started out in the negative. So overall, my budget looks like it stayed the same, but when you look at the line items, they were reduced that amount. Where it looks like it wasn't reduced, it's due to anticipated insurance costs, salary costs, and for those that are within my department. So I understand what you're saying. I can show it to you on Tuesday, but my overall.
I appreciate that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I understand what she's saying, yeah.
And I wonder, I guess maybe just with the overall budget, and again, to echo Ms. Russell, like, thank you to everybody who's worked through to make some difficult decisions, and then bring forward a balanced budget. And again, nothing that probably is answerable today necessarily, but as we think forward, like, what are some of the unanticipated, we won't know until down the road, right? Consequences or issues that may come forward by some of the reductions? Or are there any areas where a difficult decision was made that we're just like, we're gonna have to see how this plays out with this budget? I just wonder,
Randy, I agree. I think we're not told and I'm not saying it in a negative way. I'm saying we had a goal, we're reaching our goal, but the things that'll be like, well, you guys said you wanted to reduce this and we wanted to reach it. There are always unintended consequences when we go this route, but we had to start somewhere. I wholeheartedly agree with that as well. But I don't have a clear picture of some of the areas of what cutting that out actually means. Especially when we talk about student achievement and when we talk about community engagement and ensuring that we have the most basic resources I don't want them to be basic, but when we talk about day-to-day operations, how do we ensure that those things aren't impacted by choices that we're making in this budget? So.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Russell. Yeah, and I guess, yeah, just what are, and we may not know for another year or 2 years or, but what are some of those decisions that have been made that are going to impact some of those things? So that's just a curiosity, like bringing forward. And then with vacancies, again, it sounds like they're long-term vacancies that are being absorbed or collapsed, but like, were there any that were like, oh man, I wish we wouldn't have to like collapse those? And these are just wonderings like in my own head, nothing that necessarily needs to be discussed, but I just,
Well,
what
I
are those
disagree with you.
unanticipated?
I disagree with you your last statement that it needs to be discussed because, again, for us to get a full understanding of the operations, there's different paths. I've chosen the path of, and we've had this discussion in Finance Committee, the narrative of the departments, the conversations that Dr. Stubblefield has with her department heads in those departments of how do you make these hard decisions? What did you, the board, we don't have the hard decision, we strike off one trip or whatever, but these decisions impact lives. Staff's lives, students' lives, operations. So that's why I say I disagree that we do need those conversations so that we understand that, well, you know what, you're going to have to increase or decrease, and you understand why. The other thing I ask you, I don't know how we bring it in, but those needs assessments that we looked at it from a high level. Well, is there something, and I ask, think outside the box, or is there something we're not, is that Saturday school something you really need, you don't have the people to do it, but maybe one of those boosters, or that's not the good word to use.
Owners.
The community engagement people. Boosters a whole nother conversation. But still, that's why we start early, and that's why we dig deep, in my opinion.
Yeah. So here's what I will share. The board did have a goal, but we also had things that we were going to have to make decisions around with ESSER that we found that was working in the data, and it was good for families and community. And so we had those things. So those things had to be done. In some cases, it was we stopped doing this in order to do this. Some of the stuff we don't necessarily know. We have to live with it, but if you are starting early, we will be able to talk about it. There are, when we look at the building needs assessment, and although, you could have, you still can talk about them at any point when we're talking about the budget. We will come back with those 3 questions with the responses and the answers that are required by the law. But when there's not a building, most buildings, between like what's allocated between their title or their Title I replacement, along with their general budget, they're typically able to carry out those things that they are wanting to. The other component we have to remember is if you think back to our KCKPS report 3 years ago, there were so many buildings doing so many different things that we were given a directive, you need to narrow, focus, and track the data. So like a Saturday Academy, actually they'll be at the last June meeting, there's a whole Saturday Academy that's been happening in this community for over 20 years. Right. And so they'll be here to share. Their goal is to grow to 100 students at each grade level.
I was talking about the Carl Bruce principal mentioned that.
Right, so I think
they're not connected, I don't think.
So we can connect, like if she has the funds to do it, or if she doesn't have the people, there's one that's already in place. We provide the transportation. That's our commitment to them. And it's been in place for well over 20 years. So in some things, there are already things that exist in the community that we just maybe need to tap into. But in other cases, it may be things that she does have the capacity if she had the people to do it, but if not, we can connect those resources.
Yeah, that's just an example.
Yeah, but when you said it, it did spark, because I just was at their closing ceremony, and it's with Kansas City, Kansas Community College. They have about 150 kids there. Most of them are our kids. They do want to grow it to 100 kids per grade
I
level.
mean, we've attended it.
Yeah.
All that, yeah. But just, that's what I'm saying. If we are serious, and I'm not saying we're not serious, but those thoughts, we all have those thoughts, and those are legitimate questions and level of understanding that we as a board have never done. And it's time to do it, because once you make the cuts, and then you see there's an impact.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying, is we may not know what that impact is right away, but I think it's a discussion and conversation like that we need to understand as a board when we're asking like these questions to make cuts or whatnot. Like, there are gonna be some things that are impacted right away, some that we may not see until a year or 2-3 years down the road. So that's what I was saying, like, it may not need to be discussed today because we don't know what the impacts of the potential cuts might be right now. But absolutely, like, as we're saying, if we're making a cut, and I'll just pick on a department superintendent's budget, right? Just as an example, what does that happen? What does that mean down the road? So I agree, like, conversation needs to happen, but we just may not know the unanticipated impact right away on some of these issues.
So we can share that, or we'll come back and say, we tried this without this, and so we're recommending that you add it based off of whatever. But if you didn't do that, you wouldn't be able to do the things that's on the list. You wouldn't be able to give increases that you're committing to. So it's really like, do the benefits outweigh what is the negative impact? And we have to live through that for a year before we can really talk about it. We show specifically the lines. So, like, I'll pick on myself. Like, I had money allocated for books. It's reduced. I'll buy less books, but there are other ways that I can acquire books. Like, I don't think I'm gonna be impacted negatively by that. And that may be the case for several departments, like we reduced it, but there are other partnerships or things that we can think about. And then there will be some unintended consequences, and we'll be able to, honestly, we'll have a good idea probably by semester, right? Like, if you start talking in September, if we're saying, hey, this is not working, we're saying build this back into the budget next year, or we're good, we will be able to give you some sort of progress monitoring after the first quarter, and a definite idea probably by the semester.
But then we were somewhat pre-warned when we knew we weren't going to get the ESSER money, that this is going to put a big dent. I mean, look at summer school. In comparison, when we had ESSER monies,
Right.
we could do more, and now we have to make the adjustment.
Right, and we were
really want
planning for
that.
that, yeah.
Then we got to really work at it and figure it out. So that's been a dramatic change.
Yeah, so and the reality of it is, we will never be able to afford what we were doing with the ESSER dollars because of the amount of the dollars. And so that's why we specifically said these were the things that we feel like will continue to move us in the right direction. There were lots of things that we were able to do, and a lot of it was spent on, like, HVACs and those one-time purchases, and that's why with the dollars, as many big-ticket one-time items so that you don't have to worry about, like, trying to replicate it, because our budgets no school budget is built like that. So we anticipated it, and that's why we went through the process of prioritizing and saying, here's what we'll plan to continue.
And in the superintendent's budget, what are other expenses?
Other expenses, things that are charged to that line, I will if I bring somebody in, like, to do stuff with staff, it can be, the first year that I was here, I paid for thought exchange out of that budget. It varies. And you can see the line item of what's been charged there, when you do the bill pay, but honestly, off the top of my head, I can't think. Don actually manages all of that for me.
You know, we got a response from, how do you, and this actually will fold into one of the other last items, professional development. How do, in some of the conversations with faculty, suggesting that the professional development sessions could be more educational.
You said you got a letter, or?
No. Past sessions with negotiations, some of the comments were made that the professional development was something that they had covered, that it was not effective. So just looking at their budget, how do they?
So they now, like, we can share the surveys after every session. There's surveys, they get feedback, they adjust. We will be submitting our 5-year professional development plan. There's a rep from every building that is a part of that. So I mean, if it's recent, I'm not sure, but if it's in the past. So there have been adjustments made, and most of the session, like most of the, actually the surveys are typically more positive than not. They do feedback surveys after each session. We have gotten feedback around, like they always give us feedback, but I think it is different than a few years ago, but there's always opportunity to get better, which is why they do the surveys around those. The professional development also has been more streamlined to what our initiatives are around our KISA goals and those things that we're required to do. I don't know necessarily in the past if that was how it was developed, but we've aligned that, all of that as well.
Great, thank you.
Additional questions on any of the budgets before you, board? I would just lift up as well, and again, this is for future, as we continue to grow with our dual language program, and that continues to expand and grow, those costs will continue to increase, right? So this year budgeted 400+ thousand, I think. So it's anticipating, I think, for the board to know, like, that's a department that I think will continue to need some additional support financially as it grows into newer grade levels and what that might look like. So I just lift that up again, not to say that, not that I have any specific questions on it, but just to say that, hey, as that grows and it's an initiative of ours that we continue to invest in, that's going to be one that will need some additional resources moving forward.
Have we taken, moving to the library,
School or?
well, budget 82, public library fund?
Okay.
I remember some reference, another Tracy question. When there's a storm, a strong wind, the doors don't close or something, the front doors. Again, those immediate, are those immediate repairs, repair costs? Once again, I'm sure they're on a cycle too of what is needed. Have they been taken into consideration in this budget?
The buildings are maintained by the district, so those come out of our operations and maintenance.
So we corrected that this
Oh,
year.
okay.
Tracy, it actually comes out of the mill that is assessed because that is for maintenance and those kind of things. So we were
Okay.
correct. No,
I'm sorry,
and
I
I
didn't know that.
just, when you said it, it was historically, but we've separated. It should come out of that amount that is being assessed for the mills because it is for operations maintenance.
So that's not reflected, these,
The mill levy is not,
Okay.
that may be some of the day-to-day, but some of those larger, something came up this year that we had to pay for that it was charged to that. I can't remember what it was, but depending on the level, like if it's just day-to-day, there's a line for it, but the larger projects would come out of that. Is that correct, Mr. Lilly? Yeah.
That's correct. Like this year, there was some decking at one of
FLs.
the libraries.
Yeah.
They used some of their capital outlay funds on. Some of the day-to-day stuff, depending, if it's something that we can do in-house, a lot of times we'll try to absorb some of that, but for those larger expenses, they're using their capital as well.
okay, so there's another budget that we're not seeing for the library, correct? Am I to interpret what you said?
They reference it as capital, but it is within their whole budget. So when we were talking about the library, what that additional mill goes towards,
Right.
we have it in a different budget line, a different revenue line, so they can track that, but it is all still within Fund 82, which
Okay.
is their fund.
Right, is it reflected in this document we have?
It should be if that's, if they've
Okay.
taken over those expenses, yes.
Yeah, so when you get down to like
Very bottom,
water, sewer, disposable services, repair and maintenance services,
Right.
non-technology repairs, it would be those sort of items, Ms.?
those kind of line items, and the computer hardware,
Yeah.
the big ticket item.
I believe so.
All right. Thank you.
For the library, they went from $70,109 to $8,000 for general supplies and materials. That's a big cut. So where is that going to be picked up at?
It may be, some of it is now electronic, so it may be in another line. Ms. Levers is not here, but I can ask her. My assumption would be with the automation of a lot of things, where they may have been spending money on like certain supplies is no longer needed because it's provided through the technology components.
And we have 3 buildings, right? 8 officers, law enforcement officers, 3 buildings, 3 libraries. West, Main,
What-
South.
Oh, building, yes, west,
And
south,
FL,
and
Flagel,
4,
4.
okay. We have security out there,
yeah.
okay.
And they pay us to provide security, right?
Yes, that's what that line item is.
Because one thing, they're better, because I go up at the one on Minnesota quite a bit, and every now and then, there's a problem when that security is taken to go somewhere else within the district, and they're left without security. And there's a lot of mental illness, a lot of homelessness, and that's not their fault, but they do need security.
Yeah, so there is 8 allocated. If you look over in the yellow box that tells it. The only time that happens is when there is a situation at a school and we would prioritize, and we can't backfill it, and that's when that occurs. But it is not a regular thing. It's like an emergency situation.
But I was there when they moved security to go up, when they did a book fair or something at the laundromat. And again, if you go up there, it's kind of scary. And they need security, so I wish we would remember that. I know you're saying we got 8, I get it. But sometimes they have been moved to cover other events. Not that there was a problem at another school, but for their particular building, they need security. It's better, but every now and then, there's not someone there.
I had a question.
Yes, Mr.
You
Mallon.
speaking of the main library of Sixth
Yeah.
Street?
Yeah, on Minnesota.
Yeah, I did tell what you're saying. The conversation she brings in that area, it needs to be enhanced more so than others. I would say at all times, while it's an operation, the opening hours.
Yeah.
And I had a question, since we're on libraries, how are there salary, I can speak, I guess, this time about it. Are their salaries compatible, or are they getting an increase in salaries as well?
They do have Ms. Hamlin's going forward. They do
Okay.
have the same 5% built into their budget, I believe. Are they a part of the salary study? Yes.
Librarians will be one of the positions we're looking at on this first go-round. So our consultants will be helping us review the librarian salaries.
Okay, and it will go in place for this coming year,
That's the intent.
the increase?
Yeah, if you
Yes,
approve
yeah,
it,
the
it would
5%.
be.
Okay, for clarity, I have been approached by individuals that work at the libraries, and they could use more money, too. I'm just saying what I'm saying.
And we don't
Yeah.
know yet specifically what that group's increase will look like, but we will be reviewing the data that our consultants provide us regarding surrounding librarians, so.
Okay.
That's
Russ.
at the public library, the school library, because we always have to distinguish. School librarians or library media specialists are a part of the negotiated agreement.
Ms. Russell has a question that I think is related to this.
Thank you. I want to clarify because I heard her say multiple things. The first thing was, yes, the 5% will be included, but are we saying that the librarians are being included in the classified presentation that will be shared on June 11th? Is that?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and I also want to clarify that we're not just talking about the library, or librarians, we're also talking about associates and the mobile bus drivers, not mobile bus drivers, but you know what I'm saying, the bookmobile driver. All of the components, this is a conversation we've been having for almost a year and a half, so I want to make sure we're not just taking care of one section of the library, we're looking at all of it.
Yes, we can include the library associates, and I think there's like a specialist position. We can look at all of those.
Okay, thank you.
And ma'am, do you guys work with the individual who's over the public libraries?
Yes, yeah. So
Her
their
department, both
HR
HR?
department, yes,
Okay.
yes, they do.
Because when they didn't get, and thank you for helping them, they didn't get they did get it eventually, the bonus, because they didn't know, because they had asked me, what about our bonus? And
Right.
I assumed everybody
So-
was getting it.
Well, because we couldn't, they couldn't be included in ESSER, they had to build it in their budget, they have built it into their budget and
Okay.
they do receive it. We have streamlined the communications and those kind of things within the last couple of years to make sure that they are more parallel. And they do have regular meetings with the HR person over there, and Ms. Levers participates in cabinet and extended cabinet and DLT. So they are more in our meetings on a regular basis.
And thank you, because I got met at the door with that. Where's our money? What about us? You all forgot us. I said, no, you're getting your money. And they kept saying, no, we're not. So I do appreciate that. But they just felt they weren't included. So it's good to know that the two entities are working together. Thank you.
And to address Mr. Mylan's point, as a matter of history, and time goes so fast around here, I think it could be upwards of maybe 4 years now, but the library was engaged in a market review and elevated their salaries to be competitive with the area librarians. And the same thing happened, I think his first year, Dr. Stubblefield was here, that the administrators, different levels were participating. I don't think all, but some of them participated in a market review. It wasn't all of them, I don't believe.
At the library?
No.
For district?
For the district. I think it's your first year here.
Yeah, there was a market review for all, yes.
Right, so when you ask questions of competitiveness,
Right.
that has occurred.
Yeah.
Now, and just my constant comment, we don't have the same tax base as Johnson County, so we cannot be on equal level. It just, it doesn't happen, in my opinion. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I got you. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, you got that blank
And
look
that-
looking at
I
me.
know that doesn't make it easy to attract people though, as well.
No, it doesn't make it
Yeah,
easy at all,
I
but,
understand the rationale, and I understand that, even
Okay.
when it goes back to nursing anything.
right,
Yeah,
right,
okay, that's what you run into,
okay.
Ms. Russell?
actuality, yeah.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, Dr. Nguyen, I disagree with you a little bit there. I think, yes, does it have to be yes, am I saying that it has to be completely the same as Johnson County? No, but am I saying, do we need to pay people a livable wage? Yes, that is what I'm saying. If I cannot afford month to month my utilities based on the salary and the work that I do, that's not okay. And so I think there are two conversations, and I just want to be clear that just because we're comparing doesn't mean that it has to be equal, but should people be able to live off of their working salary? Absolutely, and I will advocate for that every day at no cost, because that's how we keep people. And if we don't have vital services, we don't have a working team. So.
But the problem with that, you can't pay them if you don't have the money.
Yeah.
That sounds good. God knows, I wish everybody could get $1 million. But let's be realistic about where we are and deal with reality too. 'Cause
But
if
that also
that
means we have to
sounds nice.
restructure. If we have 15 people making a very low salary, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but truth
We
is,
could have 10 and have more, but we don't have to have this conversation now. I look forward to the information coming out on that.
Thank you.
yeah,
Right, because that's why we got everybody at least up to $15 an hour, so,
at least.
at least, so that,
I want everybody to do the math, 15 times 40 times 4 times a month, and
oh, no, nobody
ask
can live
yourself
off
if
of
you
that.
can live off of that.
No.
Yeah, we may need to
Right,
revisit that
that's a
$15
conversation
minimum as
for-
well.
Yeah, that's
in my
another
opinion.
debate. Then do
Right.
the numbers for the people who are the taxpayers.
Exactly.
Who pay that, then that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
So we won't get into that, because I think we agree to disagree.
Right.
So could I ask what's in red
Well,
with
And
the
then,
library? When it
yes, and I
says
see Ms.
amount,
Levers
amount
has her
remaining?
hands up as well, so she may be able to answer questions. She's online. But before I agree with Ms. Russell on being competitive with, and looking at that, I mean, I think it's, we can all agree to disagree differently, but we do,
Well, that's why we had the market
competitive.
studies,
Yeah.
and that's why
Right.
you continue to have those.
right. Ms. Levers, I see your hand up. Maybe.
Right, finding
While she's finding the mic, Dr. Nguyen, you said you had a question on the red on
Yeah,
libraries?
when it says amount remaining, what does that mean, Tracy? Balance remaining,
That
still in the
means-
library.
That means they have spent, or they've budgeted for 531,000 more than they spent last year, or
I'm
spent.
sorry, what are you saying?
They have budgeted for 531,000 more than they spent in 23-24.
Okay.
Ms. Levers, you had your hand up just wanted to circle back in case there was a comment you needed to make. Okay, she lowered her hand maybe. Okay, just since we're talking about salaries and money, and at one point, a few years ago, just a general question around multilingual stipends or bonus or pay. I know that was a conversation this board had at one point. I would be interested in revisiting that down the road as well. If there's, and I know that we got stuck on a few ways, like how do you measure that or how do you implement that? And so I think that is a conversation that I'd like for us at some point down the future as well to lift back up about how do we, help support. And I see Sarah coming forward.
Actually, you probably should sit over there.
That is actually one piece that I included in my questions of our consultants. So hopefully they'll be able to have some guidance or some options for us to consider.
Great, thank you. All right. So we've got about 20 minutes left. I want to respect everyone's time. Any additional burning questions on budgets that are presented before you, board? Anything that we want to make sure we lift up while we're all together? It's Dr. Nguyen.
With the disturbing negative restrictions on DEI, how does that impact our DEI budget?
It hasn't. We haven't gotten any directions to do anything differently than what we are doing. We follow board policy, and so we have not reduced the budget in any way, so I'm not.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah. A lot of districts have, districts and universities have changed the name so that it is not targeted. They have, some have DEI, some have belonging, but we haven't shifted anything.
Okay. And it's misguided and it's disturbing. But that's what happens. Chief Police budget. Do we need other, that is probably an area that really is relevant to your comments, Mr. Lopez, as far as unanticipated or events or situations. Dr. Stubblefield?
I am pulling it up.
Yeah, it's toward the bottom.
So in regards to,
Just a generic question, is it, not to publicly say where you emphasize, where you decrease, but just the general topic of safety, because it came up as parental concern.
there were no adjustments made that should, Chief, am I misspeaking? That should impact the safety and security of our schools and our students. Yeah.
Good morning. So we were able to make the adjustments, and you won't see a difference in any of the buildings with our police officers. There will be one adjustment that you'll see with the school safety associate vacancy, but that was not an originally a scheduled place. We had an extra SSA, and we assigned it to a building, and we've retracted that, but there will still be SSAs on hand at all the schools that we expected to fill, to both manage the front doors and also manage the cameras as expected. So on a daily basis, you won't see any difference in our police response at the buildings. Now, our patrol component is cut back just a little bit with those vacancies, but that means instead of having 8 officers in the patrol function, we would only have 6 total. So the buildings won't see an impact from the reduction in our budget.
And again, not to be specific, did we apply for any security grants?
It's on the agenda for Tuesday,
Okay.
so that the board is aware, and then we get the other components. At the next meeting, once we know, we'll be asking, because it's a quick turnaround to take action. So it's on there as new business, and it shows the broad categories that we can, that are allowed this year.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Clark?
Thank you. I'm not sure who this is a question for, but one of the things that I've heard a few times is around visibility of our officers in our elementary schools. And so I understand that there are maybe some, if you're needed, then you'll come, but there have been questions around, can we have people more visible on a regular basis? And so I don't know, Chief, if you've gone back and looked at maybe the incidents reports that coincide with those schools, if having someone more visible in the day-to-day would be beneficial. Any thoughts on that?
So what I can say is we have very few incidents in our elementary schools. Primarily what we do is we have our patrol officers go and they make periodic visits, and really it's more of an opportunity for the kids to meet with our officers and high-five them and just, have good times with them. Grant Elementary is a good example where we spend a lot of time at Grant meeting with the kids, and they have pizza parties and those types of things. So we have very few problems at our elementary schools, but that's primarily what our patrol component does, is visit the elementaries to meet with kids.
Okay, and maybe I need to just, because I don't want to be very specific, so maybe it would be a good conversation for us to have, and I don't mind sharing with the board in the appropriate place. But I do have some different scenarios that I just want us to make sure that we're thinking about as we're talking through the safety of not just incidents with our kids, but maybe incidents with parents that are happening in the elementary schools as well. So I think I have a meeting with Dr. Stubblefield coming up, and then maybe if it calls for another conversation, we can have it.
Okay. I did get Ms. Lever's, just one second. She said she couldn't take the mic off, but I will read what she has. She said she's unable to unlock her mic. She's working closely with Sarah Hamlin. Oh, there you are. Are you there? Oh, it says, we are proposing lifting the base salary for the libraries from 16 to 20. We're also looking at the federal minimum wage for exempt staff by July. It should be 43. I think it is currently 43, but it should be 58. So she basically was just giving specifics to what Ms. Hamlin is saying around like the market. And then as far as just some capital projects that came up, it says also we spent money on replacing FL Slagle's roof and West Wyandott's roof this year. Those were some of the larger capital projects that came out of the mill levy expense this year. So she was just sharing those two things.
Mr. Mylan, did you have your hand up?
I had a question for Chief Nicholson. I appreciate all that you do and encouraged by what you do. My question is, we talking about budgeting, and you all are sufficient, I'm sure, for budgeted what you all have, your manpower. Is your quota sufficient? Do we have enough? It's a kind of a going between what Ms. Clark just asked about the visibility. So we have enough officers in place to do what we need to do?
We do. And again, we won't see any decrease in our level of responsiveness to calls for service or in the building. So I never want to cut money and reduce officer positions, but
Sure.
that being said, we're in good shape.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, at Wyandotte, I think they had 2,000 students. Correct me if I'm wrong.
They're about 1,800.
Okay. So what number should they have in terms of officers?
I'm not sure that's something we need to answer in open session as far as the
Okay,
number of
well,
officers
when
per
you get an
district, but
opportunity,
I would love to talk to you about that, for
Some
sure.
people have complained and this is nothing new, that there's not enough, and that possibly there needs to be more.
The situation that we're in is if we added more officers to Wyandotte versus where we're at currently, we would have a school that has one officer or no officer, depending on what school we took them from. So try to evenly distribute them across the board, make sure we have adequate coverage, knowing that Wyandotte has the bulk of our students, right? They have a large student population. So, but again, to reiterate, I feel comfortable with the staffing numbers that we have at all of our schools.
And then I think, Ms. Payton, that safety is important and the officers are important, but there has to be a balance of not over-policing the students, and then also people not relying on police officers to do discipline that staff should be doing. And in some cases, some people misunderstood, like they shouldn't be calling police for things that you wouldn't call a police officer for within a community. And so we don't want to over-police our students, and the feedback I got directly from students early on was, coming out of COVID, school didn't feel like a place that they wanted to be because so many restrictions. So we're trying to balance and create an environment and an engaging environment where they don't feel like they're being over-policed when they talk to their peers in other districts, but also maintain the safety and security of the building.
I get that, but somehow you better figure out how we can get that over to the parents, because the parents and the kids are saying two different things. You got the parents saying they don't feel safe. So how do we work that happy medium?
That's what I'm saying, we have to balance it, and it does not necessarily mean that there are more police officers in the building. It may be other adults for students to, that can provide those extra eyes and those kind of things. So I think it's those layers that we really have to continue to evaluate and take into consideration.
Well, let me make this statement. From what I'm hearing, what Chief Nicholson is saying, the quota is sufficient, and they deploy them as necessary. Because, am I correct in saying that you deploy them as necessary? If there's a time for 15 to be at Wyandotte, you can send them there. But if not a time to send them to Wyandotte and have one at Mark Twain or Carl Bruce, then that's what's needed. And your capabilities are there to do what's necessary, I guess what my question is.
That's true. We do have.
Is that what you're saying? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, sir. And periodically, we have times when people call in sick, right? And we have to move people around and plug and play from different schools. So there might be a day when we have 3 officers at a school, but we have a vacancy where we have 0 officers. So in that scenario, we would take an officer from the school that has 3 and deploy them. So we have an officer at the school where there's a vacancy. And again, primarily we use our patrol officers to fill those vacancies, so you don't really see the vacancy in a building. We also have 4 part-time officers too that we use as we can, and normally those are vacancies that we fill at the libraries with our part-time officers.
Well, I'm just saying, I think we need to use some money or whatever money's available. We need to do a better marketing job, because you hear that it's something wrong when the parents keep saying they don't feel safe. Now, something's wrong. I'm just saying we need to do a better job. If you're saying this, you're saying that, but every time they get up, they're saying they don't feel safe. So we got to do a better job of marketing what we're doing, what we need them to do, and how we all need to work together. Because why are they saying this? That's all I'm saying. They keep saying it. So what are we doing? That's a whole nother.
Ms. Page, I hear you. I think, and I just heard you say it in your last point, the most important part is that the school district cannot be the sole responsibility holder of making sure that our buildings are safe. It starts at home, it starts in the community, and then, yes, our number one priority is to educate these students, but to also make sure they're safe while they're there. But a lot of the behaviors that our teams are seeing in the buildings is based on things that happen outside of the buildings. And so we need to continue to instill in our community the importance of making sure that these issues are addressed outside and that they don't seep into our buildings because we don't have all the resources. We've talked over and over, we don't have the money to solve all the problems. And so the narrative, when I hear these stories, yes, I agree. We want our buildings to be safe, but this is not just a district. The district is not going to be able to come in and save the day in all of these issues.
Thank you. And I would just agree. I mean, I think we're all saying about the safety, how safety is important. And I think we have a unique opportunity with having our own police department within the district to continue to create those positive relationships so that it's not always, and I think that's what I heard Chief also say, is as many positive experiences that we can have with our police as they're visiting schools, high-fiving kids, like, yes, the safety piece, but also how do we increase that visibility and increase those positive relationships so that parents see that as well with the kids and between our police department. So I think there's an opportunity for us to continue to elevate that and share that story about how we're building those positive relationships between law enforcement and our kids, and that they have as many more positive experiences than not when they're in our schools and having relationships and conversations. So I think as much as we can get our officers doing that, and I think they are, right? Getting out and walking the halls and talking to kids and making sure that they're building those relationships. I think that's super critical. So thank you.
Thank you.
So have you thought of some special events that can go along with building the relationships?
We try to attend any community event that we can. So, the events that KCKPD puts on, we try to make sure that we're in.
No, I know that, but I'm saying you yourself, our force
Right.
create some events.
We do have some events that we've created, and
Like what?
primarily, there's Pizza with the Police,
Oh,
for example.
you said that.
Coffee with the Chief, and different events that I've gone to.
Kids have coffee with the chief?
Do you want to have coffee with the Chief? I'll be glad to have coffee
I said
with you.
kids.
Oh, no. This is for administrators.
Oh, okay.
And we did that at John Fisk Elementary earlier this year. And there were donuts, of course. And
Okay, I know, police and donuts.
And the kids came into the room as well. So, yeah, we try to do as much as we can to make sure that we're connecting with the kids when we have free time, so.
Yeah. And the other thing, I mean, as the Welcome Center builds out their events and they have they are always present at like the Enough is Enough events and those components, so we can just continue to be intentional about that.
Yeah, like a bicycle something or other.
A bicycle rodeo or something, yeah, it's
Yeah.
something we could explore for sure.
Because we can get the bicycles donated.
Yeah.
Or fishing.
So,
Is
Ms.
fishing anymore? Sorry.
Sorry, Dr. Wood, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Ms. Clark, I saw you raised your hand, but you lowered it. Was there anything else that you needed to have another question?
No, I'm fine. It was around communication, so I think it's been touched on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know we're coming, thank you, Chief. I know we're coming close to our time today. I do want to respect folks' time. Thank you, Board. We will continue conversations, or if you do have specific questions on any of the department budgets, please make sure that those are lifted and shared with Dr. Stubblefield so that we can make sure those are answered for everyone. Dr. Stubblefield, do you have anything else?
The only thing I was saying, looking at the timeline, the June 11th meeting will bring the classified salary scale, what is it, scale or schedule? We'll bring the new classified salary schedule along with, we would be then asking the board to approve, to move forward with the classified staff and administrative staff salary increases. Then beyond that, the only thing that I know for certain, what we'll probably bring in the June 25th meeting so that, and I'm looking at Ms. Kaiser and Ms. Walker, is the 3 questions to be answered so that you'll have to answer them. So we'll send that survey to you prior to that June 25th meeting. And when we compile it and say, how many students are not proficient, what are we doing about it? So that will be on the June 25th meeting so that at the July 16th meeting, you can approve all of the things so you can start to have time, because then in order for us to meet the deadlines for publishing the budget. So that's the last big piece that we have to bring. You've seen the building needs assessments. We'll bring those answers to those questions. You have to answer them. And so those items will be on there so that you'll have time to respond.
and ask clarifying questions regarding that.
Thank you. Ms. Russell, I see your hand raised. I do just want to, we did not, board, get to the policy, the purchasing $20,000 and under, purchasing information and the other information, so it's there. Mr. Goheen, we had tabled it for this meeting specifically. Do we need to table it again, or can we just bring it back at a future meeting? And it came from Finance Committee, so just curious legally what we need to.
Well, it was tabled for this meeting specifically, but I think you could table it again at this meeting for, again, just either a specific or a future date.
Does it have to be a specific date, or can it just be tabled until, or an upcoming meeting without a specific date?
And as you think of that, do you?
No, Greg, it can't.
First,
I think you got to take it off the table. I think you technically do. I think you take it off the table, somebody move it to a new date. I don't know that it has to be a specific date, but I think it's got to at least be, if it's going to be to the, you could say to the next regular board meeting after it's obviously not going to be a Tuesday.
Right. Board, could we target maybe June 25th? There's no board report or reports coming from staff, so the agenda might be a little lighter. I don't know if that would be.
You move it to Tuesday, I guess, if you want.
There's none Tuesday?
Actually, there's no report Tuesday, so technically.
okay.
Add it to Tuesday?
So it's 12 o'clock. I'll make the motion to take it off the table. You have to vote on that first?
You do. Second.
Is there a second? Seconded. Questions, discussion? Ms. Smith, roll call.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy, yes?
Robert Mylan Jr.,
Allen Junior, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, yes.
Thank you.
Now then I'll make the motion to table it till Tuesday. And this is the discussion, a three-part discussion, 20 less than 20, the last three files in the thing, less than 20,000 purchases, then the increased oversight, and then SMART goals. And we'll take them as three separate items.
Ms. Smith, did you get the three items?
Less than 20% SMART goals?
The three files.
The three, okay.
Files.
So,
Table until Tuesday.
get a second.
Is there a second?
We need the date, Tuesday's date,
Seconded by Ms. Page. Yes, Tuesday for May 28th.
For action.
28th. With action?
For action.
For action.
Get them taken care of.
Thank you. Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Sorry, before, any other questions or discussion on that item?
The only thing I was going to say is, so that Leslie knows, is so this, if this passes, you need to amend the agenda to add these three items to the agenda.
Any other questions? Okay, Ms. Smith, go ahead.
Yolanda Clark,
Yolanda Clark, yes.
Maxine Drew,
Maxine Drew, yes.
Randy Lopez,
Randy, yes?
Robert Mylan Jr.,
Allen Junior, yes.
Wanda Brownlee Page,
Wanda Brownlee Page, yes.
Rachel Russell,
Rachel Russell, yes.
Dr. Nguyen.
Dr. Nguyen, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Russell?
Going back to the budget timeline, the one thing that is missing from the budget as it currently stands is any items that are currently in negotiations. Is that correct?
The nursing, that is, and we don't, like, if it goes past when we have to approve the budget, like, you just have to follow those. Hopefully, they'll come to some resolution sooner than later, so we won't have that issue, but the only open.
So did you put that in the budget as it currently stands?
It's a blank line. It's no number there. There's not a number.
But I'm saying if it goes past, do you put some number there, or
No.
is
You
it
just
similar
have
to
go
the?
back and adjust it within the budget.
Okay,
Yeah, you just would have to adjust it within the budget.
okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we end, any additional final thoughts, Dr. Stubblefield or board?
I'm just gonna ask again, I've asked a couple of times in written format. If we can please send the timeline for the secretary, for the board clerk's evaluation. I think I missed that meeting and I've asked multiple times now.
Okay, we'll make sure we get that to the full board. Thank you.
Mr. Lopez, I just wanted to thank Human Resource. I thought they did a phenomenal job for the retirees in our district. I think it's important when you spend 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years that you need to be recognized, held up, celebrated, and I think everyone who came had a good time. So hopefully we can get more people to come next year because they really stepped it up. It was special. It was nice. A lot of happy faces, and they need to be appreciated. And I thought we did a good job this year.
And Ms. Page was dancing. No,
No, Dr. Stubblefield danced.
Right, Dr. Stubblefield was dancing. I seen it all over social media. You know it's a good party when the superintendent dancing.
Thank you, Ms. Page, for sharing, and thank you to HR, and congratulations to all of our retirees. If there's nothing else for today, thank you, staff, thank you, board. Everyone enjoy a safe holiday weekend. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks.
actually, Nisha led all of the dance. You know, yeah.